There you go.
Well, good morning, everyone. On item number 1, call to order. Welcome to the special council meeting for West Grey regarding budget. This is January 20th, 2021. We have all members of council present. We have a quorum. Today we are using audio and video to conduct this electronic meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be posted on our West Grey website, www.westgrey.com. Technology for this meeting is being managed by staff. We all know to refrain from clicking buttons unless we are asked to do so. Before we begin, I would ask Supervisor Hewlett to walk us through some of the features for this electronic meeting, please.
Morning, and thank you, Mayor Robinson. Before I begin, if you get disconnected at any time, you can dial 1-647-558-0588 and enter the meeting ID 889-1716-6853. Both members of council and staff have been briefed on the various features of the Zoom meeting software and will be using the raise their hand function to speak. If you have any technical issues throughout the meeting, you can send a chat message to myself, Cody Hewlett, Recreation Supervisor, and I will attempt to assist you. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Supervisor Hewlett. We are using the raise hand feature for moving and seconding, as also for voting. So we've just streamlined our process as we go along, especially now that we have the audio and video combined, that it just makes the ability to streamline. Certainly we're entering our first budget deliberation for 2021. And I know the common thread is focusing on West Grey, looking at our decisions for West Grey for the benefit of West Grey. And we've got an exciting agenda ahead of us. So that completes item number 1. Item number 2 is a moment of a reflection. Please take a quiet moment. Thank you. Item number 3, declaration of pecuniary interest or general nature thereof. Members of council, is there anything to declare? Noting that you can declare at any time that you realize that you have the conflict and fill out the appropriate prescribed form. On item number 4 now, closed session. Clerk Scharback, would you be so kind as to read the recommendation?
Your worship, the recommendation is that the Council of the Corporation of the Municipality of West Grey does now go into a closed session at 9:04 a.m. with the CAO, the clerk, Director of Finance, for the purpose of addressing matters pertaining to personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees.
Is there a mover for this motion? Looking for a raised hand feature. Deputy Mayor Hutchinson, I see, and as a seconder, Councillor Hergert. Members of council, are there any questions on the motion? I'm just double checking, Councillor Hergert, is your hand up for a question? Okay. Seeing none, all those in favor, please indicate with a raised hand on your dashboard. Seven members of council have voted. We in the affirmative, so that motion carries. Thank you. I will see you in the breakout room. Hello there. I was last to come out of the breakout room. Good to see everybody. Figured out that function. I'm just Clerk Scharback with your assistant. Can you just identify that everybody through council is here and that it represents the quorum?
Through your worship, yes, everybody is here and ready to reconvene in open.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you very much. And I see staff here as well. On item 5, matters arising from the closed session. I would like to report out that in the closed session, council addressed matters pertaining to personal matters about identifiable individuals, including municipal or local board employees, and provided direction to staff. There's nothing further to report. Thank you. Okay. So we are now, Clerk Sharbuck, are we on item 6, or is there anything further that we require for motions at this stage?
Through you, Your Worship, there was one further matter to report out. Just if we could add that in, I believe Councillor Shea and Councillor Townsend wanted to provide direction following our closed session.
Thank you. Councillor Shea?
Yes, I would like to move that we direct, this was around FCM asset.
Yes.
I would like to move that we direct staff to investigate applying to the FCM Asset Management Plan Fund.
Councillor Townsend, are you seconding that motion?
Yes, I am. Thank you. Seconding that motion.
Any questions germane to this motion? Councillor Townsend, you still have your hand up, so I'd like to recognize you. Is there anything further on this from you? No, thank you. Councillor Hergert?
Yes, I would like to move an amendment to withdraw the investigate word and just leave it at direct staff to apply for the FCM grant. So I would move that amendment.
So, Madam Clerk, is that an amendment where we need to get a seconder? Or is this one that I can confirm if Councillor Shea and Councillor Townsend are okay with it? Your procedural expertise, please.
Through you, Your Worship, we should do it as a proper amendment with a mover and seconder, but I'm wondering, we're not sure what the new stream actually allows for, and if they allow for a position, or I'm not sure. I'm wondering if we could say investigate and apply if possible, or if it's appropriate, apply if we're eligible, or if the program we're applying for is eligible. I'm not sure, and perhaps Director Mighton might be able to provide more insight into that new stream that's just been announced.
I'll go to Director Mighton.
Before we get locked into a...
Exactly. Director Mighton.
Sure, through you, Madam Mayor. We can definitely bring back the scope of the project of what we're going to apply for, to confirm the parameters that we're going to, bring that forward to council before we actually submit the application. A quick review, it does look like it's an ongoing application process until funds run out. So we don't want to sit on it in case it's popular and there's a big uptake into it, but we don't have a hard deadline we have to have it in by January 31st or anything like that. So we have time to sort of put some project scope on what we might be applying for with some parameters for the next council meeting. Or the 16th, I guess the next council meeting would have already been due.
Okay, with that, Councillor Shea, how do you wish your motion to be?
Well, I believe the clerk is indicating that the amendment should be addressed individually and separately. But if I might speak to the amendment, or do you need it to be moved in second?
I just have a mover at this stage. Clerk Sharbuck, could I have some assistance with it? I have Councillor Hergert has moved an amendment, so I want to be very clear of the language and then ask for a seconder. That would be appropriate.
It would be appropriate to have a seconder, but I'm just wondering if before we get the wording finalized, if I could confirm with Councillor Hergert that let's fine tune the wording on the on your motion if we could.
Councillor Hergert?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. To the point, I believe that there are plenty of avenues for us to get in on this. I don't want to hold staff up. I'm sure that we have lots of areas of asset management that we could utilize the funds. And so that's why I say, let's not
Okay,
stop an investigation. Let's have staff pursue the grant money.
okay. So through your worship, I have an amendment to the main motion. Main motion is direct staff to investigate applying to the FCM Asset Management Program Fund. The amendment is moved by Councillor Hergert that after investigate, we add and apply for
Okay, all right. Is
the
there a
funding.
second? Oh, pardon me.
Sorry.
Go ahead. Is there a seconder for this amendment? Am I seeing Councillor Hamilton as a seconder for the amendment?
Oh, certainly. I'll second that. Thank you.
All right. Questions to the amendment or comments? Councillor Shea. I see your hand up.
I think it's just common sense implied that if it turns out we're not eligible, that for some reason that this would not bind the treasurer. And further, I just wanted to clarify that I don't feel like I need a report back on this. I just trust you guys to do the best you can. Thank you.
Thank you. CAO Johnston then to the amendment.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. There is the part of the process includes a second resolution that has to be submitted as part of the grant process with the resolution that identifies what the project title will be and the funding. So at this point, the first motion of just investigating would be enough because we would have to come back to council with the details of the project anyway for a second resolution to go with our application.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any other questions. So Clerk Sharback, could you please read the amendment and then I will call the vote on it.
So through you, your worship, the amending motion moved by Councillor Hergert and seconded by Councillor Hamilton is that after the word investigate in the main motion, we add and apply for funding if possible.
All those in favor, please raise your hand.
Sorry, can I have a point of order?
Yes?
I would withdraw my amendment. It doesn't seem to be applicable at this point, right? Our CAO has informed us that we have to come back anyway and make it specific. So I would withdraw my amending motion there.
So Clerk Sherback, as the mover is withdrawing the motion, procedurally, could you just inform all of council, but certainly anybody listening in?
Sure, procedurally, once it's moved and seconded, the motion is on the floor for council to dispose of one way or another. One way or another, it has to be addressed and settled. And if both the mover and seconder choose to withdraw that, then that's the disposition of the motion. It's been withdrawn. If one does not wish to withdraw it, we carry on another way. So I would ask if Councillor Hamilton is open to withdrawing that motion as well, then we're done with it.
Certainly, I'll withdraw. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, and that's fine, but Clerk Sherback, I just have one question. As I already called the vote on all those in favor, and we did have one hand up, procedurally, we're fine if both members of that have moved in second wish to withdraw. I just want to add that as a question.
Through you, your worship, my understanding is that it was the mover's hand, but I might be wrong on that.
No, it was.
I think it was Councillor Hergert's hand was the one that was up, and it was for to withdraw, not to vote. And perhaps I missed that altogether. I was looking down and up, so.
Okay, very good point. Councillor Hergert, for clarity, please.
Yes, Madam Mayor, the clerk is correct. I was trying to get a point of order in there to withdraw. I apologize for this delay too.
No, wonderful. Thank you for the clarity.
That's
okay,
good.
So with that, the amendment has been withdrawn.
Yes.
Thank you. So now we are going to go to the main motion, but I do see Councillor Hamilton's hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. I have an amendment. Since staff are investigating the FCM opportunity, there's a brand new opportunity that seems to go very well. So if I might, it's hard to, I guess I should put the motion forward and then I can explain it. But it's that I would add and investigate Municipal Natural Assets Initiative intake for developing a natural asset inventory. And I promise you, council, it's a steal of a deal. And if we can talk about it, that'd be great.
So I'm just waiting for the clerk to have that written
Okay.
down. Okay, and then I will ask for a seconder. Are you good?
Or
clerk?
perhaps I might ask the clerk if I'm allowed to talk about it. It's hard to put context around it. Anyway.
Through you, your worship, the amendment I have, and I'll just check with you for the wording, Councillor Hamilton. I do appreciate that you just slowed it down there for me a little bit. Moved by Councillor Hamilton that the motion be amended by adding and that staff investigate the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative intake for developing a natural asset inventory.
Thank you.
And I think I'm wondering, Councillor, we have had some information about that previously, that the motion to investigate it at the same time, both of these funding opportunities.
Yeah.
There would be, I guess, some eligible, the same as the FCM one would come back needing a detailed resolution of council for the application.
Okay.
This program would also need some kind of a report back on eligibility or program requirements that would be part of the investigation. So
Thank you.
if that makes sense to everybody.
Yes. And I'd be looking for a seconder at this point, and then any questions with regard to the amendment. I do see Councillor Townsend. Is that a seconder, Councillor?
Yes, it is. And the clerk's right. We did get information on it. So I'd forgotten about it. Thank you.
Okay. To the amendment, Councillor Hamilton.
Oh, thank you. Just to say, this hit my email box yesterday. The intake is right now, first quarter 2021. It's the first step in developing your green infrastructure inventory. As part of our infrastructure asset management plan that we're developing by July 1st, 2023, we must include our green infrastructure as part of that plan. This would enable us potentially to take that first step. And just to share that they encourage applications. If selected, local governments will be expected to contribute $2,500 or approximately 10 to 15% of the inventory project costs. So it's very, it's a great opportunity. So I appreciate having the opportunity to have staff report back about that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend.
Yeah, sorry, I just didn't take my hand down.
Oh, fair enough. Is there anybody else that wishes to speak to the amendment? Then I'll call the question on the amendment. All those in favor indicate with a raised hand. All members of council have voted in favor of this motion. The motion is carried. Thank you. And I believe now we might be on to the main motion, unless there's anything else at this point on an amendment. Clerk Sharbutt, could you read the main motion?
Through you, your worship, the main motion is that council directs staff to investigate applying to the FCM Asset Management Program Fund, and that staff investigate applying to the Municipal Natural Assets Initiative intake for developing a natural asset inventory.
Thank you for reading that. Is there anything further from members of council before I call the vote? Seeing none, all those in favor indicate with a raised hand. All members of council have voted in favor of this motion. The motion is carried. Thank you. Now, before we go on to item number 6, just a couple of things, if I might. I do want to mention that I have been invited, as well as the other heads of council for Ontario, to have a virtual meeting with Ministers Clark and McLeod at 1 o'clock. And I do note that our special council meeting for today was listed from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. So I don't know whether council wishes to go further in the meeting beyond even 1 p.m. However, I will say that if we do continue on past 1 p.m., I will continue to be at this particular meeting, and I'll have to catch up otherwise with that that phone call. But I wanted you to have the awareness that that was taking place at 1 o'clock. And if there was an ability or that we were not in the meeting, I would be attending that virtually. So that is an FYI at this stage. And I also note that we should have sort of a discussion on where we wish to go, because we also need to eat. We need to have a break in that. So I'm just going to go to Councillor Townsend, who has his hand up, and then let's explore our next step, please. Councillor Townsend.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of thoughts. First of all, I know we need to consider lunch, and we always seem to get there one way or the other. But the other point is that I would rely on yourself to determine whether or not the minister's call is appropriate for you to step out, and therefore, we accommodate that or not as you wish. We can go forward, or if you truly want to be here, then you can make those comments known, and then we can make the decision even better. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. And I would just say that if this council chooses to, because we are sitting as council, if this council chooses to continue around like even right up to 5 to 1 or beyond, that time frame, I will be in this meeting, this council meeting for budget. If we are adjourned, I will be attending that virtual meeting with the ministers. So that's my pathway forward. And then that's just an FYI. So whatever way this council wishes to go, that's fine. Yes, I agree with lunch for sure. I see Councillor Shea and then Councillor Harker.
I had expected to spend more time than this on this item today. We have a very limited number of budget meetings planned. Would it be possible to postpone lunch until 1 o'clock, and that you could leave for your other meeting during the lunch break? And I don't know if your other meeting is going to take longer than half an hour.
It should be within that. That's actually a really wonderful solution. If everybody else is okay to wait till 1 o'clock for lunch, as we did yesterday, quite frankly. But okay. Anything further, Councillor Shea?
No.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. Very good idea, Councillor Hergert.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I note that the West Grey Public Librarian is on the line, or CEO, pardon me, is on the line. Are we doing presentations from any group today, or we were to deliberate this agenda that we have in front of us?
Director Mighton on that? Oh, or actually, I see Madam CAO's hand came up. So Madam CAO then.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, I am not muted. We are dealing with the library on January 27th. I believe our chief librarian is just participating as part of our senior management team, listening in.
Good. All right, thank you. So members of council, shall we continue on and take a lunch break at 1 o'clock for, and I'll say a half an hour? How does members of council feel? If you could just give me either an indication on the affirmative or on the negative. A thumb raise is great, or a thumb down. Okay, I think we're good. So let's just pursue maybe we'll just adjourn a slightly before 1 in order that I could get into the session. All right, thank you very much. Let's proceed. We are now on item number 6, which is staff report 6.1, Director of Finance and Treasurer, 6.1.1, 2021 budget review. Clerk Charbeck, would you please read the recommendation? I think at this point, we would go for a mover and seconder and hold off on the vote till later. I just want the format recognized for all members of council and those listening in.
Through your worship, the recommendation is that council review the draft 2021 budget. So I think if there's a mover and seconder and a vote now or a vote later, it really won't change that. There's no decision to make changes or take action. It's just review, and
Okay.
Director Mighton will lead us through that review.
So then, members of council, I'll get a mover and seconder, and I will call the vote on that, and then we'll move along with the budget. Does that seem appropriate? Okay. Oh, Councillor Hamilton, you have your hand up.
Only to move it. I was just going to move it, Mayor Robinson.
Okay, good. All right. And Councillor Shea, just was that a question, or are you going to move or second something?
I'll second the motion.
Wonderful. Okay. So with that, we do know the motion at hand, moved by Councillor Hamilton, seconded by Councillor Shea. All those in favor indicate with a raised hand. All members of council have voted in favor of this motion. The motion is carried. Thank you. So with that, Director Mighton, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. We will, from the report, I've outlined some of the increases that we're expecting over the normal year, the year end. So it's looks at about a 14% when we layer in both the police and the library as well. We can go through each of the items individually and make decisions as we go down through, if that's council's wish. The first one, the new wage grid, that has a further follow-up to come back. So that is an item that's that we have to circle back to at our next meeting. But I didn't know, do you want to go down individually on the process?
I think we're getting some input right now. Councillor Hutchinson.
Yeah, that's fine. We can work through each line, but I'd just like to state, first of all, that I'm disappointed that we're starting out at 14%, and that my idea is that given that we're in a pandemic, that we should be looking at 0%. So how we do that, I don't know. First of all, I'm thinking we have some emergency funding, and I don't know where we are with that. We've just come through a year where definitely our income from different facilities and whatnot is a way down. We do have reserve money, and I know that we keep reserves for projects going forward, but I also think that we use reserves for emergency funding. And I think this is an example of emergency funding. So from my perspective, I'm looking at every opportunity we can to get things down to 0. And if that means pulling money out of reserve to do that, I'm not sure, or just saying no, or to cut back on people's wish list, if that's the case be, or maybe some people, maybe we have to throw it back to some departments and say, what do you really, really need given the situation we're in? So that's where I'm coming from, and I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you very much through you, Madam Mayor. I have a similar goal, but it's more minimized rather than go to 0. I think there's a lot of initiatives that we've undertaken, and I'll quote the police station as one that we reviewed only yesterday to move forward on, and that has an inherent cost that we are not going to avoid. However, I think we need to make sure, for example, that if we're looking at that number, is that truly the number we're going to hit in 2021. I also think in order to do the best job we can and identify those opportunities, the first thing we have to do is understand where do we truly sit as we enter into 2021. So for example, I'll give you two comments. The first one, council had requested that we back out anything that was one time and then do the annualization of things that would run on a constant basis, but were implemented sometime through the year, and that occurred. And in order to look at what's occurred in the package we have, the projections for year end were absolutely amazing. Everybody's coming in on budget. And that to me is not realistic. I know we kept staff working, and I know that there was still a lot to do. So I'm not criticizing the fact that you would pay all your salaries or whatever. But I see some things like utilities and things of that nature that are running at a certain rate for 10 months. And then all of a sudden you've got, instead of 1/10 of what you saw for the previous 10 months, you've seen 50%, 70% in the last 2 months. And it implies to me there's topping up of budgets. And I'm not singling one out because it appears that in one way or another, the right thing was done where you see you're running at a lot less as a run rate for the year, and that reflects, and therefore there's some surplus released. In other circumstances, I see that the last entry on a page is to transfer some money to reserve, and that actually puts a cost center in a deficit, meaning over budget. And to me, that doesn't make sense either, unless a decision or a proposal is coming forward to say, let's use some of that fund that was provided for the offsetting COVID costs. And I haven't seen that noted against certain moves to reserve. So I think we need to establish our point of what is already committed, what we cannot just arbitrarily say, let's not do the wish list and everything will be good. It won't, because we committed to things last year that will impact 2021. And we can't shirk the fact that that's a decision we made. And that's bringing a position in half year. And now we're going to get the full run rate in 2021. So I'd like to make that request that we know that number. So if the 14.5 is really 1%, because that's the impact, or it's 6% or 10%, we need to know that. Because by definition, depending where that number comes, we will end up not doing a lot of what's here if it's very high. If it's lower, then we may have an opportunity. So I'd like to request that we get that from finance so we understand what is the number increase already that we can't reverse, we can't go back behind. We have to find another way, and maybe that's the reserve, pulling on the reserve, or the COVID dollars. I don't know. I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Townsend. So Director Mighton, to Councillor Townsend's comments and question, do you at this point know the number or the financial number that is committed to?
So we are, if you include estimated borrowing costs for the police, for the new construction building, that's about 3%. That has, we won't see 100% of that, but based on when we start that project, but that's what we're estimating borrowing costs once the building's completed. So depending if you want all of that in or not, that's 300,000 to 350. So you're looking about 3% there. We have the 71,000 for borrowing costs for the purchase of the land. That has been committed. That is not going anywhere. We have $90,000 additional that we need for insurance. That's not going anywhere. The bringing back the seconded partway through the year. So that gets us to probably the commitments in the fire department for the radio infrastructure updates, the loan payback for the fire truck that arrived at the end of 2020, and the peer support program. Those have already been committed to. So when we look at that operating wise, Even before police and library board, you're at 6.79%. The capital increase in this budget is about 2%, so you're at 8.7%. And when you layer in the police board and the library board ask, we're now at our 14%.
Thank you for those numbers. Thank you for the clarity. Councillor Townsend, you still have the mic.
Thank you very much. So if I translate it in a slightly different way, and I'd request Director Mighton to confirm, we're really sitting at around 8.7%. That is no choice. If we canceled the police building, that's where we would be. We know we're not going to do that, by the way. So it's going to be whatever portion of that 3% for the police, or 3.5 in that range, that we truly are going to hit within 2020. And do we have to have funds out that we are responsible for paying out as cash, if you will, in 2020? Or does all that kind of get wrapped up into the loan or debentures or whatever they happen to be that allows us to draw upon them, and we start paying as of, say, January 1, 2021, if we end in December? Or if it is September we finish, they begin October 1st.
Through you,
Go ahead.
Madam Mayor. So if we need to draw on the line of credit, if you will, the construction, during construction, for every payment certificate, when I draw $1 million down on that, we will start paying interest on that at the going rate each month. And then it'll increase when I get the next $1 million, the next $1 million. When we know the final cost of construction, then that's when we will pursue the long-term locked in borrowing costs, and we will start paying back the principal. So up during the construction, we will only be paying interest on what we're drawing down on that. But the final, once we know the final costs of it, then that will get locked in. We'll figure out the term, get the different various rates that are out there, and then we'll start paying interest and principal in 21 once the project is complete, or if the project's completed in 21, it's January 22. Whenever that project is completed, then we'd start paying back the principal. But we will have interest costs while we're constructing it, as we have to pay each payment certificate.
Okay, so Madam Mayor, again, I'll ask for process. I'm wondering if we could request either by resolution motion that the Director of Finance actually have a conversation with our organization, the Formworks, that is actually helping us manage the project, to get some idea of the timing that they might anticipate, to give us some help in determining the number. But either way, it does look like we're starting at about a 10% already before we move anywhere else. So I think our problem is we're not doing anything initially until we figure out how we back up, and then do we come back forward with any initiatives per se. I think that's the position we find ourselves in. And so I think that's the way we would proceed, rather than looking at every request. I think we have to figure out how we build the capacity within the finance opportunity we have going forward. And again, I don't know if we've taken into account things like the new builds, the new tax revenue, those kind of things. I know sometimes we look at the number and then we kind of bring that in. I don't know where that is at this point. I forgot to look at that as part of my review. And so if the Director of Finance could comment on that too, I'd be happy. And then I'll back off and let other people speak. Thank you.
Thanks. Before I go to Director Mike, I just want to confirm, Clerk Sharbach, your video is not on, and just wondered if that could be put on, if you don't mind, or, okay, thank you. Director Mighton?
Yes, through you, Madam Mayor. So I've had a chance to look at the assessment figures at year end, and also the county has a draft levy increase. The school board rates have been released, so I was able to put together sort of a tax rate scenario for what the impact will be. We're anticipating, based on the year end numbers, about a growth of about $186,000 based on our year-end numbers. The overall tax levy is one piece of it. If that's right now, that's where we're landing at if it's the 14%. If we get it to the 9%, if we get it to 10%, whichever, then that would roll down to about an overall blended rate of about 5.88%. But based on $100,000 of assessment, it would be about a $66 increase. 55 would be us, $11 would be the county based on their current draft projected tax levy increase. So that would be on a per 100,000 of residential assessment as an example. So I think that's what you were looking for, Councillor Townsend.
It was, sorry. It was, and I also wanted to, sorry, I forgot to mention, I'd really like the departmental folks that were actually looking at the projections to year end to really look hard to make sure that those numbers are in fact appropriate because of some of the things I mentioned. And also, I'd like to see what it is without the reserve transfers at year end, because there are a few in there that go back to the reserve. I'm not saying let's not do it, but I think we need to understand it before we start saying, let's move, into reserve. And the reason I say that is in at least one case that does create a deficit. And to me, moving money from your operating into reserve at year end to create a deficit without having a direction or decision on where that money is going to go. And I know there is a bylaw out there that gave instruction, but I think with this kind of number, I think we need to be careful not to do that in advance of year end until we're comfortable that's an appropriate action. But thank you for the number. That's exactly what I was looking at. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, thank you as well, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Shea.
Yes, so Director Mighton, I have some similar questions that I need a little bit of help with achieving some clarity. In the document that we got from you that has as its first title 2020 projected to year end as of November 30th, 20. It's a quite a lengthy document, kind of looks like our budget document, but it's got the projected to year ends. And I see things like figures that, according to this, as of November 30th, were at 83% of their budgeted amounts. And yet it's projected that by the year end, the item will have matched the budgeted amount. So how can we only have been at 83% on November 30th, but by December 30th, we've used up the remaining 17%. How does that work?
So some of the budget figures, of course, November 30th is when you receive the package. Work started on that in October. So really, you're looking at invoices that have been September to October that have been paid. Because we have to cut it off and start building it in order to get it there. We have got to get it out to the department heads in order to have it all consolidated for November 30th. We had to send it out to department heads when it's really about a September, end of September invoicing, depending on the timing of invoices. Some are annual, some are semi-annual. And some come every month. So depending on the timing of it. But at most departments, we as you would see when you look back on our financial statements, we are usually fairly tight with our budgeted amounts and what we come in at. There's not a lot of leeway in there. Some of the transfers, if it is that you would see in there, if, as an example, we received 20,000 from the county for a CIP program. We have not rolled out that CIP program. I must put that $20,000 into reserve. Council does not have a choice, or we return it to the county. We have to hold it for specific purposes. I can think of 2 items that would be coming forward with requests to transfer to reserve. One being the $40,000 that we had budgeted for the Zamboni that we didn't purchase in Normanby. So looking at putting that into reserve since we raised it in 2020, but that before it actually happens would be a request of council because we didn't budget it. We included that in the projections because we will be asking council for that to go in. So the projections include that type of transfer that we will have to ask for. If it was something that we budgeted to transfer to reserve, then that's the direction, and it has been transferred to reserve.
Okay, well, if I might, I'm just going to pick a random concrete example here from the page admin corporate projected to year end. Under administration wages, it says that we've used 83%. But under 2 lines down, under administration EI contribution, we've used 99.9%. So how can we have, as of some date, which is, I was assuming was November 30th, because that's what it says on the front of the document. So some date, let's say it was October 30th or September 30th, how can we have paid 83% of our administration wages, but at the same time paid 100% of our EI contributions? Aren't they linked?
Yes, up to a maximum. If your wage, once you contribute up to a maximum amount into EI, the same goes with CPP, then you no longer contribute. So if there's any employees that have hit that amount in there, then the EI is maxed out. Okay,
so on the cover page of that document, at the very bottom, it says annual levy requirements, and then says minus $247,000 or minus 2.4%. I don't understand how you would have a levy requirement on a projected year end from the previous year.
So we received $372,000 for COVID-related Safe Restart funding. If we do not have allocations for 100% of that funding, we must roll that over into 2021 usage. So we have to go through that process to see what areas that we've been able to justify some of that COVID-related funding. We have received that amount, so that's in those projections, but I haven't had a chance when this was presented to evaluate what all those are. Things like when we did our waiving of interest, penalty and interest for a 3-month period, that impact, that's a COVID related expense. The lost arena revenues, so some of those things, how did that measure up after we were able to open our arenas for a little bit through the year? What was the impacts? What were the extra expenses that we did see? So we've got to go through that process as part of the report back that we will eventually have to do to the ministry. So that's that surplus that you see there is potentially related to the Safe Restart funding.
So is that 2.4% surplus on 2020? Can that be applied against the 14.4% levy increase for 2021? Can that be used?
Yep. In the bylaw that you passed, we would at year end, if it's not related to the COVID funding, then that's different. But if any surplus left remaining, we would roll into the general capital reserve, and that is dictated from your budget bylaw, your tax rate bylaw, that's what we where we roll any surplus into. So then if that would get put in there, and if you want to draw down on that capital fund, that is totally discretionary and to you, provided none of it's related to the COVID. If it was related, if 100,000 of that was related to the Safe Restart funding, then it has to be used to offset. Now that we're back in lockdown, we've had to, we're losing ice rentals again. So we're already, when this was budget project, when our 2021 budget was developed, we were hoping to be fully operating. So that's a new wrinkle. So we know that we're losing another 2-3 months of ice rentals that we're going to have to offset with any Safe Restart funding carryover.
Thank you. I've noticed with some other organizations like SMART and some other municipalities, they're actually projecting budget surpluses due to COVID in 2020. That there was lost revenue from things like arena rental, but there were also lost expenses, like not having to put ice in, for example. And that in this total sum of things, they were actually coming out ahead financially. Would you say that's our situation?
I haven't had a chance to review all of that entirely to see how much. We had a bit of part-time labor in the arenas that was drawn back, but we didn't have a lot. We did keep some of it and reallocated some of the staff to different areas. So we didn't, so I have to take a look at some of those. There's departments, mostly it's the recreation area that was hit in our case. As far as public works and admin, we were basically status quo. So it we'll have to take a look. I haven't had a chance to finish taking a look at that yet.
But if it turns out that there are savings in this year, they would get rolled into a capital fund, and then we
Yep.
out of the capital fund. So if there was a savings,
Yep.
say in rec, we couldn't just apply that to next year's rec.
You certainly could. It would when we put it into the general capital fund, that is something that council has just decided. If you want to move it to operating, if you want to use it for whatever capital project, that's entirely at council's discretion. It's a completely discretional fund. It's just that's where any surplus would get applied at the end of the year.
Yeah, but that wouldn't be applied to, say, the police building, which is a capital project.
So when you say the police building in 2020,
2021.
in 2021,
Yes.
like you're thinking, I'm not sure I'm following your line of
There's a
question.
surplus that goes into a capital fund. Can it go from the capital fund to the police building, because the police building is a capital project?
If directed by council, absolutely.
Okay.
I can't withdraw from, I can't put anything to or from a reserve without council direction either through the budget bylaw or a separate motion of council, with the exception of, like I mentioned, if it's grant or donated funds that we must hold for a specific purpose, then I have to put it into a reserve or a deferred revenue until we satisfy the requirements about which the funds were donated. But otherwise, I have to come to council for any direction as to use of funds if it wasn't budgeted for,
Okay.
or go into the reserve as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Councillor Shea. Councillor Hergert.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Shea, for beating me to that budget or that bylaw that transfers things to reserve, monies to reserve. So Carrie, just to clarify, that's budgeted money from 2020 that was specific to each department. It was not used. And then the bylaw brings that money back into this general capital.
Yes.
Is there a way, and I'm not sure if Madam CEO or, with the direction of our treasurer would be able to advise on rescinding that, halting that, or is it best to go to capital and for our own thoughts that we would draw on capital this year, because that's really the money that was excess in 2020?
So the question, I'll go ahead, Director Mighton, and then I'll go to Madam CAO. Sure.
Yeah, if you want to change your 2020, you know, sure, it's going to accomplish the same thing. If you want to call it something different, revenue stability fund, if you want to call it whatever, you can put things in and out of it. It's a holding place. It just happens that in the current bylaw in 2020, it's called General Capital Reserve. If you want to make a motion or amend that bylaw to move it into a reserve called something different, okay, sure, we'll move it into that. The items in that bylaw, if you were to look at it, there's a few, I think police, library, water, sewer, and recreation fundraising are the ones that typically stand off the top of my head that we would typically automatically look at budget to actual and move into reserve any surplus on those fronts. And then other than those specifically itemized, and I don't think I'm missing any, but we'd have to pull out the bylaw, then whatever's left would go into reserve right now in general capital. But if you want to rename it, you can amend the bylaw to do so, I believe.
Okay.
Anyways.
Okay, thank you. And really, it's council awareness. Whatever is excess from 2020, it could be drawn on from that capital for 2021. Okay, I'll leave that there. We can make a further decision later as council. I do have some concern. I believe I must be missing a report here. I've got council report. I've got every department. I don't see anything about public works. I don't see anything about bringing bridges back online. And so this is really the council report for today. And I'm somewhat joking about missing a paper because I feel like I have all the papers here and all the departments, but I read in the deeper budget that we're going to status quo for 2021 budget, and we're expecting to meet budget target. I don't see any bridges in here.
Director Mighton.
Yep. So we have,
I imagine the Lawrence Bridge has some money we've already collected.
we have $600,000 in, part of that is gas tax funding for the structure 46 Macquarie Bridge. And we have the Lawrence Bridge, again, that's grant funded in large part. And then we are pulling some development charges for that one. And that's the two bridges that we show in the capital details.
Could you reference the documents for that, please?
Yep, so that's in your 2021 budget package.
Just so
And
everybody's on the same page.
yep, and it will be at the very end of your package, the last 1, 2, 3, 4, the last 5 pages are your capital details. Public Works is on the second page of those capital details, but it's like the 4th page from the end.
Thank you. Further, Councillor Herger.
My concern is we're not getting to the bridges that have been closed. This is a concern not just for the traveling public, but this will be a concern for the police that are trying to get there in time, fire, emergency services. And I don't see that we're actually opening bridges as fast as we're closing them. And I think that this is a budget constraint. We obviously have to get a new police building because that's required, but we also need to balance that building with all the other needs of our community. And I really am disappointed that we are, we're just as minimum in that area as we can be. I know that the funding already came through last year, so this isn't a big spend in an area that costs big money. We can't get out the duct tape for these things. They are required to be planned for, and we're not doing enough in my mind. So I'll leave my comment on that one. And I have a question about the police building, and I believe Director of Finance, I sent an email last week. I was curious about the annual repayment limit for the Municipality of West Grey and what we might be up against. Do we have an annual repayment limit, and what is that amount?
Yes, we have to calculate an annual repayment limit. It will be much higher than we would ever need to build this building. I can look it up if you give me a few minutes, but it is a large amount. So we are not constrained in any way, shape, or form to borrow $6 million and our annual repayment limit of 300 to 350. We will in no way, shape, or form be anywhere close to our annual repayment limit.
That makes me feel very comfortable. Thank you, Director.
I will get
So-
that number for you though.
Yes, please.
Yeah, I'm also very comforted that we have some room to build new bridges or replace or repair new bridges as needed then. We could actually find some money to finance in that annual repayment limit cap, right? We have room there.
For a
Director Knight.
one-time, yes, absolutely. Just remember we have to reset the bar then every year. So once we build this, say if it's a $6 million building, now we need $300,000 every year going forward. So that you have to reset that in your budget. So even though we build a bridge for $2 million or 3 bridges, whatever it might be, okay, your annual repayment of that is going to take up room for your construction. So it's just the police building is a one-time construction. We don't construct. It's the biggest project that West Grey has seen since its creation. So it's a significant investment and a one-time. We're not going to build a police station every 10 years. Bridges, we've got a lot that are going to need work, as you can see, every year. So we just need to be cognizant of the path if we're going to go down borrowing for bridges, that you're also taking up the room for future construction. Because if we borrow for the next 2 years to build bridges without those tax increases to support the payback, we're not going to be able to do that on an annual basis at some point.
Director Mighton, I'm curious what the interest rate is to borrow at this moment. Is it?
We were what did we borrow for the land? And it is a moving target. It changes, fluctuates every day. I think we were something like 1.75, I think it was, if memory serves me correctly, for the land when we borrowed for that, when we locked that in.
Is this a low interest rate in your mind, Ms. Mighton?
Yep, it's lower than what we had seen when we did the Durham Road project 10 years ago.
Okay.
We were probably in the 4% range back then.
So to that point, I've been reminded by several of our constituents about bridges, and even last night again, there is a reminder of our bridge meeting that we had last year, maybe it was February, March, and our council chamber was full. And I would like our council to somewhat go back to that moment and see the importance and need from our community regarding bridges. I'm not satisfied with our public works, budget here. I feel that does not address the needs of the community, and the needs of the community would be at minimum for council to decide whether or not we open 1 bridge a year, we do 2 bridges a year, set a decent, set a number that we can afford. And I'm not seeing that being any kind of priority. I see that we've got to get the new shiny in there, but people built these roads. Our ancestors built these roads, and they're very expensive to rebuild a road. We've heard the costs of building a road, and we shy away from that, saying, well, we couldn't possibly open a road. That's so expensive. But the point is, we have to invest where we have these roads already. And I'm not satisfied with the budget for public works. I believe that we need to spend some more money there. I also note that the building permit this is a whole new topic. I note that the building permit for the Markdale Hospital has been issued. Director Mighton, what is our commitment to the Markdale Hospital?
The pledge made by previous councils was $190,000 to be paid over a 10-year period at the start of construction. We currently have, I think, about $70,000 in reserve towards that pledge.
Okay, so I believe last year we took some out of there, but we'll need to, and you said that's at the beginning of the build, that's
Yes.
due?
That's what the pledge indicated at the time. Yeah.
Okay, so I don't see that in here that we're going to make any significant increase to that reserve.
Not significant, I don't think. I think I put it back in, but let me double check.
But I know that the building permit has been issued. I've heard that from the mayor over in Grey Highlands.
Could be, I'll take your word for it. I haven't heard anything. I don't know.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just know that's one of our responsibilities. We pledged
Yeah.
that, right? So
So this budget has $10,000 to go into the reserve for the hospital pledge.
So we'd be at about 80 there then.
Yeah.
I'm also looking at the whole number, as Councillor Hutchison has mentioned before. We have to do better on that number. I don't believe I'm the person to come through and slash at this moment. I believe that our department heads and so on really need to go back with that final 2020 number, what they used of budget. I also, and then represent a budget with the final year numbers. I believe that we met all of our minimum maintenance standards, our minimums last year. I've not heard anything to the contrary on that. And to that point, last year we maybe had about 10 weeks of viable business we could handle. I'm also looking at this year, and 2020 and a crystal ball just didn't work. But if I look at 2021 and think of a crystal ball, we might not have mass vaccination until later on in this year. And I would think that our numbers from 2020 would be near sufficient for 2021 as it relates to operations. So the utilities being a fraction, the wages being a fraction, those kind of numbers. So I'm actually looking for a department review on this so we can come back with those 2020 finals and see exactly what we need to do. I applaud the efforts to move, like for staff that have moved as much of their work online so we could even keep generating revenue and new ways of generating revenue, even in this week with the bag tags being online. So I do applaud the efforts to minimize and to replan from last year. But all of the money that we did budget from last year that has not been utilized, I believe that we need to have a real frank discussion about how we use that. And Director Mighton has presented us with some options there. So I'll leave my comments right there. Thank you very much, Mayor.
Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Townsend now and then recognize that following Councillor Townsend, it will be Councillor Hutchinson. But at this point, is there a willingness for a lunch break? And then we continue on and begin with Councillor Townsend in one half hour from now. So I'm wondering, all right? With
that
everyone?
was my suggestion, Madam Mayor. That's why I had my hand up.
Lovely.
Yes, that.
We are at that magic hour of 1 o'clock that we did discuss. So we are on recess now until 1:30. And please enjoy your lunch and we'll call it back to order at 1:30. Thank you one and all. Please take your mic off and your audio video. Thanks. Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone, and thank you on cue for the recording. I hope everybody enjoyed their lunch. It is 1:30 and I'm calling our meeting back to order. With the assistance of Clerk Scharbeck, I just want to see that all members of council are present. Yep, I answered my own question. So thank you very much. But with that, Clerk Scharbeck, do we have the staff that we require?
Just get unmuted there. Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. Yes, I think we're ready to keep going.
We're ready to go now. So I do want to mention that before the recess, I had Councillor Townsend and then Councillor Hutchinson listed. Councillor Townsend was did reference lunch at the prescribed time. So thank you. But I do want to also know, are there any questions at this point from you, Councillor?
No, thank you. Not at this time.
Okay, fair enough. Councillor Hutchinson, you were next on my list, and I see your hand up as well. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so just to get back to where we were a little bit, I do like the idea of rolling over dollars from 2020, any surplus that might have been there, into capital reserves. I think anything we can do to bring it forward to help get this number down. I also noticed from the paperwork that we have about $9 million in reserves overall. That's the way I read that. Now, Carrie might be able to correct me on that. So my thoughts are, I would like to see us use some of that money and also not put money into reserves. I see a lot of places we're putting money into reserve. Some cases, maybe we have to, but I would suggest if we don't have to, then we don't do it, because of the type of year that we're in. I also would like to question whether we really need, being that, again, because of COVID gear and tough times, that do we really need a new half-ton for public works and police? Do we really need a plow truck? And I also like to mention that I do agree that we need to put money into bridges, and ideally I would like to see us put $1 million into bridges every year if we could. I don't know how we do that. One of the suggestions I might have, and I don't know whether this would fly, but I suggest that we do $100 charge per household for West Grey that's dedicated for the next 5 years towards bridges. And I don't know whether we can do that outside of the tax base. I think we talked about that before. So there will be better times ahead, but this is not the year, I think, for any drastic budget increase. That's my comments for now.
Thank you for that. Director Mighton, Director Mighton, would you be able to comment on Councillor Hutchinson's discussion with regard to a potential for a infrastructure fee charge, however you want to address it? So there would be a certain amount that per households would be charged, and that money, the collected money, would be dedicated to infrastructure repairs and enhancements, etc. However council determined. Can you comment authority, enabling legislation, or from your perspective, please?
Yep, absolutely. It's the optics of it. We've got, as an example, if there's 6%, 7% increase on operating right now, you could levy 2%. That is the portion that was showing as a capital increase. Levy that as a separate capital levy. It'll show separately, but in the bottom line to the taxpayer, it's still 8%. So we can, optically, do different things, but to the bottom line, the taxpayer is still getting that in their on the tax bill is still X number, 2%, 3%, 5% for capital, 5% for operating, or whatever the numbers are. It still means we're taking 10% more from them. But we can certainly do that, and it some may help to focus capital council to keep money for certain capital items. I think we do a pretty decent job of isolating with our transfer to reserves for different projects, but if it's another tool, if it helps focus a certain amount on capital, it's certainly something there, but it's still a tax.
Councillor Hutchinson?
Yeah, I agree. I have seen other municipalities have done it, and it would work out to $500,000 a year if you did something along the line, or a little bit more probably. But it's just a thought. That way, our director would know that he's got $500,000 coming in that's strictly for bridges, and anything we can do on top of that, like funding, and if we can work something else out of the budget. It's just an option. I just throw it out there for ideas. What about the reserve idea, Director? Like, is that a possibility that we don't put money into reserves, that we pull some money from reserves? I know some of it's restricted and dedicated to certain areas, but is that an option?
Certainly, if it's a discretionary reserve, that is under your control. If it's one of the legislative reserves, like development charges, that we have to follow the rules for those, or obligatory reserves, parkland dedications, those kind of things, we're restricted in those. But the discretionary reserves, you've set those up, and that's at your decision to apply those. You want to make sure, as some advice, to not just arbitrarily lower a tax to get to a tax rate without being able to provide continuing decrease in your tax levy requirement. Because next year, if we throw $200,000 or $500,000 of discretionary reserves at lowering this budget, then next year, unless we change service levels or operations of some sort, we need that 500,000 back, because we just depleted our reserves. So you're going to face that. You're just deferring the increase to 2022 instead of dealing with it in 2021. If it's a one-off, then it's okay. Yep, we're not going to have this expenditure all the time, but you just want to be cautious with how you're applying those reserves, because without replenishing them, if it's just an arbitrary decrease, that funding isn't there again in the following year.
Yeah, well, yeah, and I agree. And it's not, I mean, there are better times ahead. This is one of those years that we'll never see again, hopefully in my lifetime anyways. But I think we have to make some sacrifices, and that's one way of doing it. So, and then the other thing is, do we need some of the equipment that we suggested? I think the other area was in recreation. We're looking at a new scrubber and some new things for the arenas. Do we really need them? Maybe we can get by without them this year and put it off to next year or the year after, or whatever. So I'm just throwing that out there, food for thought. But I really do have a concern with coming in with any kind of huge increase this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hutchinson. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. And just reflecting on everything I've heard so far, I think as council, I'd like us to think about our budget in a different way and communicate our budget in a different way. When we get hung up on the percentage, and that's often how the story is spun and how we compare ourselves to others, that really only tells a small piece of the story. So for example, I'm sorry, Director Mighton, how much would you gave an example of the impact to a resident, like let's say it was $100 impact on their taxes. What percentage would that approximately be? Or
$100. Yep. Let me just.
Sorry, just for an example.
Yep. No, absolutely. So when we were looking, I had stuck in I think a 9. What was let me just find the, what is our current 1.4? Okay, so at our 14% increase, the blended overall tax increase per 100,000 of assessment would be $97.73. 86 is us, 11 is the county projected, that based on their draft. Yeah.
Per $100,000.
Per 100,000, yeah, of residential.
So first part, I think we can tell our story better by saying which portion is ours to when people receive their tax bill. But also, like 14% sounds crazy. It sounds so high. Works out to be $60 per household, per $100,000 per household. Let's just pretend our tax increase was $120. Let's just pretend. That's $10 a month. That would be about, $2 a week, 25 cents a day. When you think of all the services we deliver as municipality, a 25 cents day increase is not huge. And I think this budget pretty responsible. There's not a lot of there's not a lot of enhancements in this budget. It's mostly a lights on budget. You know, we have this one-time impact that will stay in the levy of adding the police station. We have to do it, and we're being very responsible in how we're going about it. So Director Mighton, the police station, the land, is that about a 3% or 4% hit? How is that impacting this year's levy?
So it's about 3.5%.
Right.
Within that 14 that you're looking at, about 3.5% is combined, getting us to a level of payback of 300,000 for an eventual construction completed building loan, and the layering on top of that, the known payment for the land that we purchased. So
Right.
both of those all in, we're about 3.5%.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you. I just think focusing on the that percentage piece, which is what our community and the newspapers love to talk about, doesn't advance our conversations of guardians of our excuse me, our municipality and our future. And when you break it down per day, per week, the number 14% doesn't seem so wild anymore. I think we will do our due diligence. We'll go through those items that we can debate, those extras. We'll go through that process. But I can't support taking money out of reserves to offset something that we would regularly be paying, because as our Director Mighton said, we now have to put that back in next year. So we're already we're kicking the can and making it worse for ourselves next year. If we don't put money into reserves as we are scheduled to do this year, well, now we're borrowing from our future and our future generations. That doesn't seem very fair. This last year was a bad year for COVID and its impacts. This year is a terrible year. Next year, I don't think it's going to be an easy year next year. It could be very similar. So I think we'll be really responsible, and I think we have to rethink how we approach and tell the story of our budget. And so I also can't support not paying for a truck this year. Let's pay it next year. I know we did that last year, and I actually supported that last year, but I've changed my mindset for this year. We have a capital replacement plan. If we don't do it this year, again, we're just putting more stress on next year, putting more stress on all our vehicles. We're borrowing from our future to offset today. So I would challenge our council to let's work our way through these points that are laid out for us, that we can debate, that we have some choices around, and start making some decisions today about the budget. So I'm wondering, Treasurer Mighton, how were you envisioning us going through the choices that we do have, the decision making that we have? Do you have a format in mind, or what was your approach? Thank you.
Yep. If we want to start going through the list, we can, as an example, okay, take the, I don't know if you want to talk about the council piece, or if you want to move past that wage amount discussion and go into the insurance. As an example, we have an insurance reserve. We did have a significant increase. It is common across the industry. 29% was our premium increase. You were provided with some documentations on that. So we can get into that. We could soften the blow this year, knowing that we need to recognize that portion next year. If that's something that we want to move towards, say 45,000 of the 90. We have that insurance reserve built up to help pay for premiums, our liability premiums, should we get any significant cases. We're on the hook for the first $25,000. So we want to keep some in there, but perhaps our reserve is at a balance where we could help soften that blow of that increase between this year and next year, knowing that we're facing the 45,000 recognition, plus hopefully the insurance industry kind of normalizes a bit and it's not as significant of an increase. I did pull some of the local treasurers, we were all exchanging. Some have different carriers, but they're all seeing similar types of increases. So it's kind of a reset in that industry. But so we can kind of deal with that. Yay, nay, make the decision, move forward, and then go down to the next kind of thing. Like I said, the 71, it's not negotiable. We need to build that back in because that's the land. We have that locked in. So, kind of taking it off. The other piece is after we go through some of those operational items, the capital, going through that on each capital project and going through the details. What do you want to move forward? Do we want to have that project move forward or defer that type of thing? But that's how I kind of envisioned moving it forward, but open to suggestions if others want to take a different path.
Okay, well, thank you for that. And that's good because that focuses us back on, I know we've had general questions and we've been addressing your report overall, which is great. But at some point, whether it was today or in the next meeting, we are going to have to deal with the list that's been presented to us in the Director of Finance and Treasurer's report. So let's just put a placeholder on that for now. I do want to address 3 other members of council have questions, and then we can circle back and just have a path forward for the balance of our discussion today. I do see Councillor Hutchinson.
Sorry, no, I'll take my hand down for now.
Fair enough. Councillor Townsend then.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Just an observation. I like the idea of starting with the operational side to see what we can do there, because that'll help us understand the risk. I'm going to ask staff to kind of keep a slightly different lens on the discussion though, meaning it's not just direction from us, but for example, modernization, COVID funds. How long is the depreciation going to be for the police building, Director Mighton?
The amortization of the loan?
Yes.
So we have to determine that. I would say probably 20 to 30 years.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so that will become an issue because it means for 30 years we're going to maintain that same amount there. Also, if we establish something like a standard that says whatever we gave last year to the bridges is guaranteed going forward, for example, then what that does, at least it gives a set amount, we can move forward, and the director just manages within those dollars. And plus he gets access to whatever else might be out there for grants or other infrastructure stuff. If we then look at, as I just said, grants, not just for that particular item, but others. And we also look at, and I don't know if there is such an item, but I'm going to call it emergency or sort of budget stressed almost infrastructure funding, whether it be from FCM or elsewhere, because we have a huge amount of infrastructure for the size of our municipality. And if necessary, if there's resources in an institution, whether it be government or elsewhere, that we can draw on to help us with our asset management of those, because just knowing what you have is step one. Figuring out how to maintain it is really the end result and the big one. So again, I know we said we'll try for FCM, but if there's anything else available we can look at. And equipment delay is fine as long as we're not just doing it to a schedule that doesn't make sense. If somebody says do it every 5 years, but we're finding that because of the broad expanse of our municipality, we've got to do it sooner, or because we find we're buying quality, so we're spending more and they last longer, then we adjust it in our asset management as to our history. And then also, I think we should challenge the Economic Development Advisory Committee's strat plan to take this on in the sense of understanding what the impacts are and where the opportunities are, whether it be for growth, attracting business, whatever it could be, to help us with revenue and those types of things. And these are things that will not happen today per se, but if you kind of keep that lens on it, then maybe something will pop out in either staff's eyes or our eyes that we can actually say, what about looking at this as we go forward, rather than just saying, what are we going to do? The other thing is, I'd like to see an outlook for, say, 10 years. And it's just a window you pick, right? And you can pick 20, you can pick 5, you can pick whatever you like. But it has to be significant enough that you get an idea when you get your asset management plan in place, you'll see when these things are going to pop up, and you'll see when bridges are coming up and those kind of things. And it makes it easier to budget rather than trying to do it looking in the back mirror. We made the decisions last year by looking at them again this year. We're not looking at it to say, do we change them? Because we can't. We've spent the money, we now have to move forward. But we're really looking at what we did in the back mirror instead of what we need to do going forward. So having a period of projection, and you make the best assumptions you can, they get adjusted every year, but you have that rolling outlook. And my last point is, and this is operational, we are spending a ton of money on the police building and the land. As noted before, that's 3.5%. We have a request for 4%, because it's over $400,000 in operational expenditures for the police. That means we're being asked for 7.5% of that 14 out of the one service. If we did nothing today and we just said, okay, let's go forward, that budget represents 36.8% of our levy, right? That's huge. That's a huge percentage. I'm not saying it all comes from levy, but ultimately the levy will be restricted by the capacity we have overall financially. So we need to think about what we want to do for the police request. And I want to maintain the service. I want to support the service, but there are times when you can't do it all in 1 year. And we're jumping quite significantly. Going forward, we won't have that jump. Next year, we won't have that same 3.5% for the particular build. If in fact we incur it all this year, if we don't, we're going to have a portion of it next year. But once we get by those next 2 years, we now get to a flat rate from that perspective. It no longer has that same impact. So had we done a projection, we would know that. So therefore, we can make decisions today that aren't mandatory to do today, and we can make them 2 years from now. And that's not everything, and that can be operational, it can be capital, it can be all kinds of stuff. But this is how I believe we need to structure our budget so that we are looking not just at what's, the next step down the stairs, it's how many steps do you want to look at? And that should help us do a lot more forecasting and a lot more planning. And I must admit, I'm certainly hoping we can do something like that with the strategic plan from economic development in the way we roll out things. So we're always supporting the growth, and we're always able to try to bring something to the table. And I don't mean us per se, but I mean the actions that are suggested or the areas of focus will always bring something in support of our growth and our financial stability and being able to do these things. I know it's a longer view, and I know it's totally different than what we're looking at today, but I think we've hit a crossroads where we just can't look at short term. We've got to look at long term and understand the impact of a decision we make today. What does it do in 1 year, 2 years, or 5, or whatever else we want to look at? Because we're going to have more capital. We're going to have more buildings that are going to need work, right? You've already heard, that maybe you might look at a library issue. What does that mean if you can't expand? How do you address that if you don't have a plan? You don't know what it's going to be, when it's going to come, if it's going to come. So we can do that kind of thing. And we will need that if we're going to do asset management correctly, because there is a financial piece when you get to the end. So you can plan your finances to support your asset management plan. So we're going there anyway. But since we're at a crossroads, I'm suggesting we do it now. Those are my comments. If anyone else has a response or staff does, I'd appreciate it.
Well, thank you, Councillor Townsend, very much for all of those comments. I'm going to go to Director Mighton in terms of the projected forecast. Do you want to, could you please just comment on Councillor Townsend's dialogue?
Yep, it's like he indicated, it's part of that asset management plan. The financial strategy is part of the existing plan that we have. It's got to be part of the one moving forward when we incorporate all of the assets. So it's all part of that package. We've got the replacement schedules with the projections, you know, for fire trucks, for graders, for all the equipment. So yeah, we've got all the different pieces, and it'll all be brought together, and a continual strategy going forward.
Good, thank you for that. So I do see, well, I see 3 hands, but, and I will call them out. But I also, after we address this, I wonder if we could circle back and deal with the report at hand and maybe go through the items. And I would look to Director Mighton to walk us through those items on your report. And I think that's, I like the discussion. I think it is absolutely necessary. Everyone's participating. But I do want to see if we can address some of these items, if not all, at least at the beginning, our first day of budget deliberations. So, okay. Councillor Townsend, you had identified that you had completed a speaking.
I just had one more, if you don't mind, please.
Oh, go ahead then.
Yep. Sorry, I meant on that topic. The issue of bridges itself, I know Councillor Hergert raised the issue of opening closed bridges. And when you look at asset management, a closed bridge, unless it has a safety, security, emergency focus or issue, is considered to have zero risk. And by having zero risk, then it doesn't make the priority list. And if you do asset management correctly, you don't do it. And that's not a prejudice against a bridge. It's not a prejudice against a municipality, a road, or whatever. It's the way the system works. If we're able to get control of the rest of our assets and get down far enough where you find that all of them are very low risk, then perhaps that's the time you get there. That's the criticality of the asset management plan. It will help you manage that and get there when you can and should. But we saw, 3 bridges in the last 12 months have had issues. We just got notified of another one that we had to close. Luckily enough, we're working on it, right? That tells you your asset management and the work that Director Zerwinski is doing is absolutely spot on. That's what it tells you, right? So how do you take that and say, I can't do it, I've got to go do one that's closed? You can't. And by the other token, you don't have the money, as we've seen, to throw another bridge on. As much as I'd like to be the best guy in the world and write a check, either from the municipality or me, to do that bridge, it's not going to happen that way. And I think if we mislead people to say we are, I don't think we're doing the right service. So that was my last comment.
But we're not
I just wanted to
misleading
clarify it. Yeah.
Thank you. We're not going to mislead anybody. We're into transparency. But I thank you for your comments. I'm going to go now to Councillor Hergert.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And to the comments of Councillor Townsend, I agree. I believe that really the bridges behind that is the asset management plan, right? And to that point, I note that there is a position in here for a finance and asset management coordinator. And I would like to move a motion that we approve that position, that position alone, the finance and asset management coordinator.
Okay. I'm looking for a seconder to that motion. I'm not seeing anybody on the what I refer to as the dashboard, and I'm not seeing anybody wave their hand physically on screen. So
okay,
there's no motion before us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Hergert? Okay. All right. Members of council, anything further? Because I would like to zero back, if we can, to just specifically to Director Mighton's report that was issued on our agenda today. With everybody's concurrence, let's go through the points. And Director Mighton, if you could, and I do see Councillor or Deputy Mayor Hutchinson's hand, and I will get there just after I make this statement. So I wonder if we could, Director Mighton, if you could walk us through your report, and we can identify the inclusion or exclusion, or the impacts, all of that with regard to budget deliberation. Okay, that's what I wanted to say. I did note that Deputy Mayor's hand is up. Please go ahead, Deputy.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. I just got a couple of, I'm sitting here just writing all kinds of notes down, but it's through you to Director Mighton. I think last year we did go into some of our reserves, and it was my understanding, again, I reviewed my notes, that we're in good condition, but we're a little bit lower than what we should be. And I just wonder if I could get some clarity on that. I just want to make sure, my understanding is we're below the average, but we're okay, but we really got to watch where we're going with it. So it's just a question to the director, please.
Certainly.
Yep. I think I recalled you're talking about like the statistics from that the ministry provides where we're comparing to others. Yeah, I think we weren't in the high end of our reserve balances, but we weren't in the jeopardy location either. But I can pull that document. It will have been updated again with the 2019 FIR information, the financial information return information. Once we had our year end done, then they send out another report. So I can circulate that as well. I think I did see it come through the other day. So we can pull that out.
Thank you, Director Mayer. I probably would like to see that, because it's, we want to be below average. If we're in the middle of the pack, then, it's an okay comfort zone considering the conditions or what we're at with the pandemic. Another thing that I'm sitting here looking is, I did some extensive research on our bridges, and we actually have 20 bridges that are deemed historical value. So I'm not sure if Director Serwinski, if I could go through you, Mayor Robinson, Director, if we have been out looking at grants or any funding or any modules at all, because we do have 20 in West Grey, and I think there's only like 42 that are kind of listed. And, one of them in particular is the Kennedy Bridge was built in 1920, and it's listed as a historical value, and it's sitting there, and there's no update or information updated on it, whether it's closing or what the status is. So I just wondered if the director, if I believe he's on with it, just could identify for my own records what's out there for historical bridges, if we even looked at that approach.
Certainly. Director Serwinski, good afternoon. And to the Deputy Mayor's inquiry.
Certainly, your worship, members of council, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Super. I haven't, I must say, I haven't looked at the historical aspect of the bridges. I've been primarily focused on the, the condition rating, the OSIM inspections, and the general operations and maintenance of those bridges. However, what I'd like to do, if it's, the will of council, and as we're moving through our budget deliberations, if I can be given the chance to please search out some information with respect to any type of considerations, grant funding, anything like that to leverage our bridge program, I would like to do that.
Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Director Serwinski, and that's why I thought it was the appropriate time before we do get to your part of the presentation that, I'm not expecting, if we get to your point today, I don't expect to have that. I just want to put that out there to give you some, an opportunity to do that research. Involved with that research, I sure would like to see that we put all 20 of those historical structures, including Kennedy, back onto the table here so we can have a look and a clear vision forward. Let's look at, is there structural problems? Are they rebuilds? Is it, is it something a prefab could replace? We experienced one not too long ago where we thought it was, the sky was falling, but we ended up just doing the deck, and things certainly had a different outcome. So I'd certainly like to, again, and this is including Kennedy Bridge, I'd like to have all of the historical, and again, we do have 20 listed, some wholesome information brought back again when you can. I know we've got some budget before us, but I think we need to discuss this, and I'm supporting what a lot of the other council members are saying is we have our infrastructure that is priority. And again, I will refer back, I think we had this discussion last year. I brought forward exactly what Councillor Hutchinson had said. If we allocate 1% each budget going towards infrastructure, then at least you've got a kind of a budget. I believe we do that at the county now, and it works very well. So before you get out of bed, January 1st, we got 1% set aside, and that goes into the infrastructure. So it's just, again, if you could bring some information, we could look. And again, I think some of these prefabs, I think there's a lot of opportunity out there. I'm not suggesting, I did ask for it prior to your term with us here, and we never did get that information. So I'm not sure, I'm not saying that there's some solutions there, but maybe there is. And my understanding is 30 or 40% less. And maybe that's something we need to look at. And that's all I'll say. I was curious on those two items. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for that. And I'm just going to, at this point, ask Clerk Scharbeck if a member of council is looking for that information, that would be most better suited in a resolution that we have for, or a motion brought forward, so we can connect back to that and track it through the budget process. Would you agree that a motion would be better than just staff direction in the minutes? I just want a good process involved here.
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, it is much clearer to follow through with the motion, and it can be very simple and very direct is probably the best way.
Thank you. So based on that inquiry, Deputy Mayor, that it's your, it's up to you. Are you putting a motion or not?
Well, I'm prepared to, yes, move a motion that again, we get the, well, in summary, we look at the 20 structures, of which maybe some of them are in this potential closure or doomed to be soon. And anything that is temporarily closed, I would like to know what is available out there, whether it's through historical funding or grants. I'd like to also, part of that, I'd like to know, again, what other opportunities are available, whether it be through prefab or replacing with a reasonable like similarity, whether we go from 2 lanes to 1 lane, just other options that are available to us. And I hope I'm not speaking too quickly there for you.
I'm going back to the clerk when she's ready to, if there's any clarification she needs on the wording. So 1 moment, please.
Okay.
I'm just wondering, Deputy Mayor, if I could just review, make sure this captures it, that staff bring forward a report reviewing the 20 historical structures and options for repairing and funding the repairs of these structures. Is that,
I guess grant,
I feel like I'm missing a piece.
Yeah, like possibly grant opportunities, like FCM could be participating. There, I know there's, I haven't dug into it, but there's seems to be different avenues for getting to funding or grants, so.
And options for funding.
Options for funding, and then in addition to that, structural options that may be available to us.
So reviewing the 20 historical structures and options for structural repairs and options for funding the repairs of these structures.
Yes,
Is that?
Yes, and that is including Kennedy Bridge, which is sitting there. So it's included in 20, because it is one that's been brought to our attention several times. So that would be my motion.
Okay, are you clear on the motion, Clerk Scharbeck?
I think I am. I just, through you, Your Worship, if I may,
Yes,
just
please.
clarify with Director Sarinsky that makes sense on the receiving end of this direction.
Director Schirinski?
Yeah, sorry about that, Your Worship. Just clicking the button there wasn't as fast as I needed to be there. Sorry. Yeah, it's clear to me what's being requested. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Clerk Scharbeck, are you okay to reread the motion? And I'd be looking for a seconder, which I see now, but could you please read the motion again, please?
And through your worship,
Thank you.
that staff bring forward a report reviewing the 20 historical structures with options for structural repairs and options for funding the necessary repairs of these structures.
Councillor Hutchinson, are you seconding that motion?
Yeah, I can second the motion, but I have a question too.
Your question now, please.
So first of all, I'm curious of how Deputy Mayor determined the historical bridges, because I don't remember seeing that in the bridge study. What were you going by to determine historical value?
Deputy Mayor.
Historical bridge. Sorry, can I ask the Deputy Mayor that, or maybe?
Yeah, I
maybe,
called upon him. No,
Absolutely. Just pulling something up. If you give me one moment there, Councillor Hutchinson, through you, Mayor Robinson.
yes.
Okay, thank you. If you go to historicbridges.org, it's an actual website. It's Ontario-based. It's got everything listed. Gives you a scoring on the national as well as the local value, and it's got a summary of how you get to it. And so I scrolled all down through it, and I started counting them there the other day, and I became quite alert to the fact that there's 20 that are listed within West Grey specifically. So, and we have some of our neighbors that have some as well. So they're all there, and then they got the values, and then it says on the description, it's a riveted pony truss, for example, sits on the edge of a small community, and interesting drive, et cetera, et cetera. So that's how they've, scored the historical value. But if you just go to historicbridges.org, it's quite a website that'll bring your everything up that you need. And there's other information, but that's the quickest local one to pull up.
Okay, so I have no problem with that. I do have a concern when if this takes away from our priority list that we have given our bridge study. I wouldn't want it to interfere with that, but I think it's great if we want to look at other funding opportunities without making any commitments to reopening bridges or whatever. Like, we're going to basically look at opportunities for funding and other opportunities to replace some of these bridges, which I have no problem. But I would hope, and maybe this question maybe for our director is, does he see any conflict with our already present bridge studies?
If I may, Mayor Robinson.
Okay. How about Deputy Mayor Hutchinson and then Director Schwinski? Yes, please.
Thank you very much. To respond to that, Councillor Hutchinson, it's not to pull away, it's actually to complement what's before us, because some of these specific structures, they may very well be on our list that needs to be done, and maybe there's some opportunity there that with grants or funding modules that could help us move forward on some projects that otherwise we wouldn't be able to do. But if there's something available, and again, we have 20 of them, I'm sure 1 or 2 of them are going to be on that list of what needs to be done. So that just looking, there's other opportunities out there. I just like to make sure that we are investigating or looking, leave no stone unturned, if you will. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, I just want to go to Director Schwinski on that, please.
Through your worship, essentially, I would, refer to the website that Deputy Mayor has brought to our attention, and compare the list and do a bit of a compare contrast and see potentially where this would work for us, and if some of the historic bridges are further down the priority list and so forth, then we can recognize that. But that would be my approach anyway.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hutchinson, you still have the mic if you wish.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
I see Councillor Shay, then Councillor Hamilton. Councillor Shay.
Thank you. This strikes me as a kind of awkward roundabout way of just reintroducing the discussion about the status of the Kennedy Bridge. I don't really support this line of thinking. I do think it's internally contradictory. You're asking us to look at historical bridges and renovating them or reviving them based on their historicality, which is going to be very, very expensive. It's going to mean replacing riveted pony trusses with riveted pony trusses. And it totally goes against the idea of trying to improve and upgrade. And at the same time, you're suggesting, Deputy Mayor, that we explore replacing these historical bridges with prefab bridges, thereby losing all of their historical value. So I can't really support this. This seems like I'm interested in history, but I don't think we should be having the Director of Public Works spending time looking up funding for renovating historical bridges. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Any response to Councillor Shay?
Yeah, it's not a matter of reopening anything. It's just, we do have 20, and I am, as we all are, we're seeking any kind of financial support that we can, regardless of what it is. The example I used on Pony Trust is just what I was reading here. It's not a matter that you're changing it. We need to explore, is there options to upgrade or to enhance the actual structures? And it may not necessarily, excuse me, be Kennedy Bridge. There's 20 other ones. And all I'm trying to do is look at or ask the director or staff to look for other options that may be available. So I think it's we have a unique opportunity with 20 structures. And I can assure you, some of these 20 structures are going to be on our list that's before us. Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Councillor Shay?
No, I can leave it at that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Hamilton, please.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. I do recall from the bridge studies that the history was a component of the scoring. So I think we just need to look back at the bridge studies. They've all been scored in terms of their historical value. That work's been done. And I'm of the same mind of Councillor Shay that we're asking a lot of that motion in particular is asking a lot of our director. I would offer to split the motion so that we could vote on having the director research funding opportunities for historical bridges. That I'd be interested in. But the working piece of developing a report and reporting on all 20 bridges, I don't think we need to ask that of our director. That work's been done. So I guess at this time I'm asking to split the motion so that we could vote separately on the director reporting back on any grant opportunities for historical bridges. If that's appropriate, Clerk Sharbach. Thank you.
Sharbach, to the process.
Sure, that the question can be separated into two. So instead of one motion, there would be two before council. The first one, again, moved by Deputy Mayor Hutchinson and seconded by Councillor Hutchinson, that staff bring forward a report reviewing the 20 historical structures and options for structural repairs. A vote. And then a second motion, which for the second motion, we would also need a mover and seconder, like a new mover and seconder, that staff investigate funding options for bridge repairs and replacement, including specific to historical bridges. So that I'm not sure if that's the two questions to ask.
If I may, I thought we were looking for funding opportunities specific to historical bridges, because I know our staff are always looking for funding opportunities for bridges, and perhaps council saying, is this a rock you've looked under yet? So I think that's what I heard from the motion, and that would be.
And that would be the two questions.
Yes.
So definitely Councillor Hamilton's request to separate the motion means that what's before us now is the first part, a report reviewing the 20 historical structures and options for repairing those structures.
And that's been, so should we deal with those motions now? But because I do see Councillor Townsend's hand is up. So I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to have Councillor Townsend speak and then go through the vote? Or would you suggest something different, Clerk Scharbach?
I would, that's your prerogative as chair, but I would suggest that they have technically been separated into 2 questions.
Oh, well, then we deal
Hamilton's
with them.
request. So regardless of when we vote, it's more appropriate to hear from somebody prior to the vote, I would think.
Yep, okay, so I will loop back to those 2 separated motions, if we get a seconder for one of those motions as well. So I'm going to first finalize with Councillor Hamilton. Is there anything further?
Oh, nothing further. I'll take my hand down. Thank you.
Okay, and now Councillor Townsend.
First, I would second Councillor Hamilton's motion, the one that she just moved. And my second point was I was going to challenge the motion as well that the Deputy Mayor put through, but I think to help him be as clear as he said and not necessarily what has been written, I think what the Deputy Mayor wanted to do was to make sure that the historical value was considered in the evaluation so that you're doing a fair evaluation in the order and position where it should be looked at, where right now that may not be there. And the Deputy Mayor can confirm that, but I don't think the original motion actually reflects that, but I think that was his intent. And I definitely heard Director Zawinski saying that he didn't have it in there and it would be helpful to have it there. So I think the conversation seemed to support my view, and I wanted to make sure that was clear as well. But I do agree with splitting it, and therefore I'd like to support Councillor Hamilton's by seconding it too.
Okay, so I'll go to the Deputy Mayor for a response to your inquiry.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. I think they're almost one of the same. I know the director is constantly looking for different avenues, grants and funding. I'm saying this is just opening of the possibility to open another door or avenue is maybe we need to look at the historical value. There may be options available there for funding. And I think that's what I was trying to emphasize, because we do have 20. Yes, I support that we should always be looking for different options of grants and any form of funding out there, federally and provincially, for any of the structures. So I think it's almost one of the same. It's just, I'm asking to look into the historical value and see what funding is there, or if there's some modules out there to help us with that.
Okay, thank you. So on the separation, is it necessary for a motion to separate? Clerk Scharbach?
Through you, Your Worship. Yes, I was going to speak to that, but I think Councillor Townsend really clarified that for us, that what I have is moved by Councillor Hamilton and seconded by Councillor Townsend, that the motion regarding a review of historical bridges and options for funding for them be separated into 2 questions. So that's the first vote, I guess.
Okay, so that is the motion before us. I see Councillor Hutchinson's hand up and then Councillor Hergert's hand up. On this motion to separate.
Yeah, why don't we make it simple and just maybe my Deputy Mayor and myself would withdraw the original motion and just go with what Councillor Hamilton had suggested, which I think is just a little, it's the same thing, but it's a little clearer. Would that work?
Well, Deputy Mayor, and it depends if you, Clerk Scharbach, we have the motion on the floor to separate those 2 items based on the initial motion that was put forward.
Yes.
So at this point, we're looking on the vote to separate out. Is that correct?
Yes, and when we've got that motion, and then we have the first question, which has been moved and seconded, and then the second question, so there's 3.
Yeah.
that if, I think a vote is probably more straightforward at this point in time, because we need to go from separating the question to the first part of the question to the second part. So there's a lot of withdrawing that
Okay.
might not just be as clearly reflected in the minutes as just a vote.
Okay, Councillor Hutchinson, to your question? Yes, okay. Okay, so Clerk Sharbuck, please read the motion.
Through you, Your Worship, the motion is that the motion regarding a review of historical bridges and options for funding for them be separated into two questions.
All those in favor indicate with a raised hand. All members of council have voted to separate the two motions. So this motion has carried with all members of council voting in favor of that. Motion carried. The next motion, Clerk Sharbuck.
Through Your Worship, that staff bring forward a report reviewing the 20 historical structures and options for structural repairs for them.
And who moved by and seconded by, please?
Moved by Deputy Mayor Hutchinson and seconded by Councillor Hutchinson.
All those in favor indicate with a raised hand. I see 3 members of council voting in favor. If you could remove your hands at this point. All those opposed. Four members of council voted against the motion, so the motion lost. Now on the other motion, Clerk Sharbuck, could you please read it?
Yes, there is no mover and seconder for this second part of the question. That staff investigate funding options for repairs to historical bridges.
Councillor Townsend, are you moving the motion?
Yes, I did indicate earlier I would second the motion.
Thank you.
You want to be the seconder? Then you just put your hand up. So Councillor Hamilton, then are you moving the motion? And Councillor Townsend, are you seconding the motion? Okay. All those in favor indicate with a hand raised. I see 6 members of council have voted in the affirmative. If you could please remove your hands. All those opposed? 1 member. So the motion does carry. Okay. Thank you for that. Now, I think, are we now circling back to Director Mighton's report? And Director Mighton, if you could walk us through the items listed and whether they are going to be in the budget or out of the budget, or in the language you wish to address it.
Okay, so first item is the grid, which we know we'll circle back to. The council remuneration, do we want to circle back to that at the same time as we do the wages, the grid, or did you want to discuss that now?
That's a good question. Members of council, are you wanting to get into the discussion with regard to the council remuneration at this time? I'm looking for the way you wish to head. I see 2 members of council. Councillor Hamilton, and yeah, Councillor Hamilton first.
Oh, I'm supporting that discussion, Mayor Robinson.
Okay.
Thank
That's
you.
actually good. As all of this is, Councillor Hutchinson.
Yeah, so just to clarify, so we are going to discuss council remuneration now?
It
Is that what-
seems like, yeah, we're going to move ahead because I'm not seeing anyone in opposition. I've heard one member of
Okay.
council articulate
So
that would
may I
be
start
fine.
then?
You
I
go
will
right
throw
ahead.
Okay, so my suggestion is that if it's going to cost us money, which it looks like it's $9,911, that we stay at status quo. I know for our director of finance, it would be a lot simpler if we just had a sort of a salary approach rather than per diem and so on. But I would like to see if it's going to save us some money, just to stay with status quo for now.
Thank you. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. I am going to say something, but I'm going to reflect on what Councillor Hutchinson said too. I don't disagree. I was going to recommend that our grid be treated in a similar manner to our staff. So I'll just float that out there. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions with regard to this? Councillor Townsend? Good, it generated some discussion. Councillor Townsend?
Yes, I would like to go to a flat rate, which is what we were trying to do to make the recording and the actual reporting through the timesheets, et cetera, and also make it a predictable amount. So if we could actually do that in a manner and set the flat rate so that it does not increase our budget, then I would be very happy to do that. If not, if we go back to the other one, my fear is it becomes a lot less predictable. And with the way we're getting more meetings, I'm afraid we will go over budget again. And I think the only reason we didn't this year, 2020, got to be careful. I keep saying this year, thinking we're still back there, but 2020, if we had not had the pandemic, et cetera, with the number of meetings we called for various things that came up, I think for sure we'd have gone over. And that was the whole intent, is to try to stabilize the amount, make it known and manageable. So I like the idea of stabilization and not increase, but by the same token, I think we should make sure that we take the experience of what our expenses were in, say, 2019 and stabilize it based on that, so we do not generate an increase for 2021.
Sorry, I didn't hear. Was that?
No, just a comment to what Councillor
Oh.
Townsend is saying in terms of.
Yeah, I was going to ask the clerk whether or not I could make that a motion too.
Do you want to comment from Director Mighton first, Councillor Townsend, or you're jumping to your motion and whatever you wish?
Sorry, I'm fine to get the comment from Director Mighton first.
Okay, Director Mighton.
Yep, sure. We can look back and make it that same sort of flat ratio. Are you looking at, there was a bit of a realignment between the mayor, deputy mayor, and councillor, sort of maintaining that separation or division between the two at the flat rate? Is that what you'd be looking for, but based on sort of 2019 amounts, or are you just looking at the 2019, whatever the actuals were? Just sort of a clarification, just based on sort of that new, there was a bit of realignment between council versus deputy versus mayor.
Councillor Townsend.
My motion would have said actuals.
Okay.
I'm not sure how to deal with that without actually creating an increase, unless you disadvantage some people versus others,
Okay.
which was not my intent.
Okay, yep, nope,
So
just,
they're representative of what got spent, and therefore they're probably representative of what does go forward. I can't say that for sure, but
nope, not a problem.
Okay, is there any other question with regard to that, Councillor? Are you done, Councillor Townsend, or are you moving a motion at this point, or shall I go through the list of speakers?
I wouldn't mind doing that. Yes, please.
Which one?
I would like to make the motion.
Please go ahead then.
So I'd like to move that for 2021 and going forward, the council compensation be moved to a flat, what do you call it, stipend or
Honorarium.
salary, whatever, honorarium, okay. Based on 2019 actuals with the only variable being mileage and conferences and seminars. So that's where I think we're at right now.
Great. Through you, Your Worship.
Yes.
Councillor Townsend, mileage, seminars.
I said the only additional from the honorarium would be a compensation for conferences, seminars, and mileage.
Okay, thank you. I've got it.
I'll take a seconder, and I have a question, and then I'll ask if there's any other questions. Councillor Hergood, are you seconding that?
I will second that. Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
So my question is in terms of the 2019 actuals, if we determine that the members of council, there's some committees that are not going to be part of the last year of this term, or if there are members of council that are no longer on their particular committee, how does that translate into the flat rate? Is that all the members of council, the councillors receive the same rate, and the deputy mayor's rate is councillors are 20, all the councillors or have the same 2019 amount, and then the deputy mayor's 2019 and the mayor's 2019. So I wonder within your intent of your motion, if you could address that. Councillor Townsend.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I was just waiting to see who you were directing it to, sorry. My intent was to keep them the same as they were. I think it was representative where the time was spent. Yes, I would assume councillors get paid exactly the same for the same job. As far as committee assignment, if there's a misalignment or an inequity, then we fix that as well to spread the work around. If committees disappear, then we have to look to the equity or whatever. The idea is to spread the work evenly, make sure you've got compensation evenly, and it's representative of the work that's being done, and as well, also reduce the amount of work for the director of finance and the councillors. It becomes a lot simpler, it's predictable, and if we still want a reporting on what you attended to make sure people are attending, that's a little easier to send that, and it may not go to finance. You know, that may go to CAO or someone that she designates to say that's the oversight of council, and that way we've asked her to do that to ensure we are attending what we should be attending.
Thank you for answering my question. Director Mighton, could you please identify what the 2019 honorarium base would be for councillors and for deputy mayor and for mayor? I'd like anyone listening in that is understands what those rates are, and that we know what we are voting on. Thank you.
Yes, so that's where when the consultant did the review, that's where there was kind of an issue. So the average counselor in 2019, just taking the 5, doing average, was about 23,500. That's with the honorarium, the conferences, per diems, all of that. The deputy mayor, when we put that in, was about 22,700. So it's less than the average counselor. Even though the honorarium, without looking at the per diems, the honorarium would have been 1.2 times, like 20% higher than the counselor honorarium. But when we layer in conferences and per diems, the deputy mayor, actually ended up with less. So that's where I was trying to get at. Do we want to incorporate that sort of realignment so that if we set the average, the counselor at 23.5, that the deputy mayor goes to 20% higher than that times there, which would put it at about 28.2. Or do we, because otherwise then the deputy mayor is making less than councillors. And then the mayor, the average or the amount in 2019 was 31,900.
I wanted the clarity of the numbers so that
Yeah.
we were all clear on what that vote was on. And I guess those numbers within the councillors are based on whether there was a board meeting, whether it was library or SMART or airport authority. And just trying to think what other ones that members of council are attached to.
Yep, so it could be recreation committees, library boards. The other thing that does tend to skew it a bit when you look at seminar conferences is if the deputy mayor or mayor attend a conference at the county level, we don't pay for that.
Right.
You know, so, and maybe they don't end up, sometimes they use their maximum at our lower tier, sometimes they don't. By the time, you know, they've gone to 2, but 1 was through the county, so we didn't have to pay for that. So that has a little bit of a skew there, but it just depends on the number of committees that each individual was on and how active those committees were. If the airport was more active in a given year, or smart transit because they were doing a lot more strategic planning, you know, there might have been a bit more in that given year, but on average, though, they all were in around that same amount, a high of 24,400 to a low on, and this is just the 5 councillors, of 21,700. So they're all within, you know, pretty close to that 23,500 average.
Thank you. I'm going to now, we have Councillor Townsend and Councillor Shea. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you. Just to clarify, if Clerk Sherbrooke could read back, I think what you'll find is the conferences are not included in that amount. So I'd like to know the amount of conferences, seminars, and there is a separate budget for that.
Clerk Sherbrooke.
Through you, Your Worship. What we have is that for 2021 and forward, council compensation be moved to a flat rate honorarium based on 2019 actuals, with variables being mileage, seminars, and conferences. So I could say with the exception of the variables, if that it clarifies it for anybody.
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
So, and then Councillor Hergert as the seconder with that language. Okay, so we've got the mover and seconder. With that, anything further, Councillor Townsend?
Yes, I was going to say if there is a disparity between the deputy mayor and the councillors, then perhaps there is a need to at least look at that, but not. I was trying not to do anything significant. I didn't realize that honorarium would be that difference or would have that kind of impact. But I still think there needs to be some sort of recognition of the that position being different than a councillor.
Yeah, and I would agree with that. And I know Director Mighton has suggested, what was the amount, the 28?
Yes, if we take out the seminar conference amounts, councillors would be 22,300.
Got it.
If we maintained that 20% differential between that, instead of the actual for the deputy mayor of 21,800, it would be like 26,800.
Yeah, and then what about the mayor?
And the mayor.
The mayor would be, let me get rid of the seminar, 31,100, roughly.
You still have the floor or the virtual mic, as it were, Councillor Townsend.
Yeah, they would seem reasonable to me, so they're adjusted to maintain that difference in between the deputy mayor and councillors, and I'm assuming that the mayor would remain unchanged because it still has a reasonable separation between the two.
Yeah, if that's your wish, yep. I'm looking for your direction.
To reflect that, if that's acceptable at this point, Clerk Sherbrooke.
Please go ahead. Clerk Sharpa.
Thank you. Through you, Your Worship. I think it's really reasonable at this point in time that if Councillor Townsend and Councillor Hergert's motion will definitely, and I think the direction to Director Mighton has helped clarify, will definitely put something in the budget. If the budget bylaw isn't passed yet, nor is the remuneration bylaw passed to set this in stone, but at least it puts a starting point there. And I think the goal was to take 2019 is sort of the last time we had a normal year to look at how many meetings are happening in an average year, rather than the 2020 COVID year. So it gives a base place to start, and sort of that overall cost for council remuneration with the conferences accepted. At least there's a base point to start. And if there's some strange discrepancies when you look at it in the budget document, there's time to review that or to make adjustments. If the positions don't seem differentiated enough.
Right.
Is that fair to at least have this as a starting point to move forward so council can see it on paper?
And I would suggest we go ahead and then, assuming that Councillor Herbert's okay as a seconder, and then we can tell from the vote whether there's anything else that needs to be adjusted.
Okay, so could we have the motion read? But I just want the clarity of where the where every position sits in terms of a dollar value at this point. And I think that's important for transparency for anyone listening in on that. So within the motion, the dollar figure attached to the position of councillor, deputy mayor, and mayor.
So based on excluded conferences and seminars, 22,300 for counselor, 26,800 for deputy, and 31,100 for mayor.
Okay. Just for the clarity, thank
Yep.
you. Anything further on well, Clerk Sharbuck, then could you read the motion and then I'll confirm.
Okay, the motion moved by Councillor Townsend does not have the amounts in there. So are you moving an amendment to the motion to include those those dollar figures?
Would it be simple to withdraw it and restate it?
Or, sorry, I missed that, Councillor Townsend. Are you saying include the amounts in there?
Yes, or
Okay.
withdraw the current one if we have to and restate it, or just revise the one that's there since it hasn't come up for vote yet.
And I would ask Councillor Hergert, may I add the amounts in?
Yes, you can. I don't feel that it's really necessary at this point because we will get back to that bylaw that actually states that, but that's fine for this motion. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay.
So for 2021 and forward, for 2021 and forward, council compensation being moved to a flat rate honorarium based on 2019 actuals, with the exception of variables being mileage, seminars, and conferences, with the rates being as follows: 22,300 for members of council, 26,800 for the deputy mayor, and 31,100 for mayor.
All right, now I see, I'm gonna go to Councillor Shea and then first of all, Councillor Townsend, you still have your hand up? I want to confirm it. Is your hand up for a reason?
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, Councillor Townsend, I see that your hand is up. Do you still have a question? No?
No, I don't.
All right, thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Shea and then to Madam CAO. Councillor Shea.
Thank you. I support this idea of going to a flat rate. I think it's going to make everyone's lives a lot easier on the accounting end. I think taking the last normal year, 2019, as a base point is not a bad idea. I don't understand the 20% bonus for the deputy mayor. Nothing personal, Tom, But in the numbers that were cited, the deputy mayor in 2019 actually got less than councillors, and that's because he attended far fewer meetings because he has all those additional county responsibilities, which I fully understand and support. But when we had Fred Dean out to talk to us and talk about our various responsibilities, he was quite clear that said the deputy mayor has no responsibilities beyond those of a councillor, except for chairing meetings in the mayor's absence. And I don't think we've had one of those yet in 2 years. So I don't really know where the 20% differential comes forward. And I would like to move an amendment that the deputy mayor be paid at the same rate as councillors.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Hergert, are you seconding that amendment?
I would second that.
Are there any comments or questions with regard to that motion at hand? Okay, first of all, Councillor CAO Johnston. I said I would call on you after Councillor Shea.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And unless I missed it, I just wanted to remind council that there is also a $50 a month technology allowance, and I don't think that's been addressed.
Okay, thanks for that. Any questions with regard to the amendment? Councillor Shea, your hand is up.
Sorry, I'll take it down.
Okay, so I'm not seeing any questions on the amendment. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. Five members of council voted in favor. If you could clear your dashboard.
Your worship, I think it was 6.
Oh, okay. Let me just double check. Thank you for that clarity. All those in favor of the amendment? Okay, I'm seeing 5. Oh. So now I see 6. So all those in favor of the amendment is, there's 6. Thank you. All those opposed, if you could clear your dashboard. 1 opposed. The motion carries. Thank you. Now to the main motion. Clerk Scharbeck, could you read the motion at hand?
Through your worship.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. Moved by Councillor Townsend and seconded by Councillor Hergert for 2021 and forward, that council compensation be moved to a flat rate honorarium based on 2019 actuals, with the exception of variables being mileage, seminars, and conferences, with rates as follows: $22,300 for council members and deputy mayor, and $31,100 for mayor.
Questions starting, I see Councillor Hamilton, Councillor Shea, Councillor Townsend. Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson, and thank you to the CEO for raising the technology allowance. Actually, I'm finding it more helpful than ever with COVID. I'm printing a whole lot more at home, so I appreciate having that, having a little bit of funding to help me do that with my own printer and my own ink and everything. So I'm looking for a suggestion from staff. Does staff have a suggestion for how we could incorporate this in to this motion?
I'm gonna start with Madam CAO and or unless, yeah, and then Director Mighton. I know there's been conversations I've asked for staff to look at whether there is Madam CAO, it's the internet stick where you have the ability to link to an existing tower or whatever. That was one option, whether there is an ability for an amount of money to contribute to your existing internet bill, etc. Anyway, I'm just going to put those out. Those were initially a discussion that we had. Madam CAO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And yes, we chatted about options to support members of council during the pandemic. Those were
Yes.
never intended to be long-term solutions. And as I understand, the lending internet stick through the library has not been approved. It's part of a grant application, so those are not available right now. And it would be, you'd only have them for a short time. So I noticed that the director of finance had her hand up. I mean, council can determine if whatever they'd like to do to offset some of those extra expenses, because I appreciate that it does actually cost a little bit more when you're working remotely. You can maintain that $50 allowance. It's in the budget at the moment, but I will let the director speak to that as well, if that's okay, Madam Mayor.
It absolutely is fine. Director Mighton.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify that when we set the 22,300, that included on the counselor side the $600 received annually for technology. So if we back that out, counselors would be at 21,700, and coincidentally, it almost mirrors the deputy mayor, who doesn't receive the technology allowance of 21,800 in 2019.
Okay, thank you for that clarity. It's in there. That's all I needed to know. Thank you.
You're welcome. Councillor Shea.
So just a couple of points of clarification. So the number that we're including is 22,300. That includes the technology allowance.
Yeah.
And so there will be no additional technology allowance beyond that.
Unless directed otherwise in your
fine.
motion.
That's fine by me. The less paperwork, the better. I did want to just float an idea, and this won't be for this discussion, that we not be given computers or iPads in the future, but that we be given access to a pot of money, so that, if you already have a computer, or you're going to go buy a computer, or you want a Mac, or you want a PC, so that we would be responsible for our own IT acquisition, and we would just be given a budget that would help us with that. I wanted a clarification about the seminars and conferences. When you say excluding seminars and conferences, does that mean the cost of registering for a seminar or conference, or does that mean a per diem that we use to get paid to attend seminars or conferences?
Director Mighton.
So I was thinking that you were referring to the motion was referring to the per diem that used to get paid. So then if we're still going to have that, we'll still need to set some sort of a per diem rate, whether it's the existing rate or not. But the registration for the actual conference, I was thinking was a separate totally expense.
Okay, that's totally fine with me. And does this, what committees are external committees, like airport, Saugeen Valley, police? These are all different levels of arm's length. Would these all be impacted?
Impacted in what way, Councillor?
Well, would we still get meeting honoraria for attending the airport meetings, because the airport is a separate organization and it's they who pay the per diem?
Director Mighton.
No, they do not pay a per diem. Saugeen Valley is the only one that pays the per diem directly to the member. Otherwise, we pay the per diem. We pay the per diem for the library, for the airport, for transit. Saugeen Valley is the only one that the two representatives receive directly from Saugeen Valley.
Terrific. Just looking for that clarity.
Yep.
Thank you.
So then there's also the Durham Cemetery Board, Library Board,
Yep.
SMART, just trying to think, and airport. And that. Okay, so that's all of the boards. Anything further, Councillor Shea? Not at this time.
Thank you.
Okay, you're welcome. Councillor Hamilton, then Councillor Hutchinson.
Oh, thank you. So for clarification, are we going to address the per diem to go to a conference now? Or are we going to address that when we talk about budget for conferences, which is clearest at this time?
So, Clerk Scharback, please, for a redirect. That's
Thank
what
you.
I'd like first.
Okay, through your worship. Thank you for raising that point, Councillor
Yeah.
Hamilton, because that per diem, any per diem is part of the remuneration package. I'm
Okay.
just wondering if in this motion that is on the floor, it's excluded, but it may well be part of the next motion. How's
Okay.
that?
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you.
No, and thanks for the procedural advice on that one too. All right, Councillor Hutchinson.
Yeah, Councillor Hudson, I was just going to suggest that we leave, I know it's not that much more paperwork for our director. If we leave the $50 technology fee, just leave it in there as a line, a budget line, and adjust our counselor pay, taking that off per month, because I think down the road, next council might come in and they may want to have a budget for technology. I know for myself, I put that towards my cell phone cost because I use my cell phone a lot. So I think it's good to have it in there. And then as Councillor Shea said, somewhere down the line, if they decide to put amount in there for computers, then that the line's already there, and it's just a matter of maybe adjusting the councillor pay. So I think it's good to have it floated separately so that it's noticeable. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Herger.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know that our consultant was able to factor in several items regarding, well, when I started on council, there was a 1/3 tax-free. That's not an issue. You know, that's not available now. So our consultant took care of that. When we start putting the technology fee in, I appreciate the computer that I've received from the municipality. It wouldn't work at all unless I paid for the internet, right? And on top of that, then we have our cell phones, we have a printer, and we have ink, which is a high commodity these days. And here's the other thing. I'm not going to suggest that I need a budget for consular services, but what I am going to say is that this computer is provided by the municipality. And if a constituent comes forward and asks me to print a form for them, I most certainly will be printing the form for them. We have a lot of people in our community that do not have internet, that do not have access to these things. And we are the people, along with the library, there are many channels that we can. But what I would say is that if we're doing business on these computers, we still have to pay for the ink and the printer, the phone, the cell phones, the everything that people need to be able to contact us with. So I don't think any reduction in the technology fee. In fact, I would suggest an increase, that we would have the amount of money being was already suggested, the $22,300. And on top of that, I would suggest that we have a $50
Your internet went down, Councillor.
technology fee.
Councillor, your
Pardon?
your audio, excuse me as well. Your audio went out, so you'll have to restate, please.
Pardon me, Madam Mayor, I just got rid of my my video there, because these are the challenges that we face. We need to have good internet, cell phones where people can reach us at. I would not avoid an increase to the technology. I think that technology fee still needs to remain, and that we need to not be overly compensated, but I would say compensated for the printer, the ink, the cell phone, all of those things that literally I use to do my work, to do my job. And that I appreciate everything that the municipality has provided, such as a computer. But to Councillor Shea's point, I agree that in the future, we should not actually buy all one piece of technology, because I don't believe that it suits each individual well. So I am unclear whether or not we need to discuss the technology portion of this now, or if that is under another bylaw where we would have had approval for the technology there.
Director Mighton.
It would have been all part of the remuneration, council remuneration bylaw, I believe. Yeah, I think it's stipulated all of that, I think, in that one.
So now's the time.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yep.
so So then I would suggest that we remain having a technology allowance of $50 per month. And I don't know if that should be a separate, if these should be divided or how that works.
So Clerk Sharp, we have a motion at hand. Is this considered an amendment? Or please advise.
Through your worship, thank you. I think Councillor Hergert's raised an interesting point of clarification for not really an amendment, but perhaps clarifying the wording of the motion that we do have on the floor. I have with rates as follows: 22,300 for council and deputy mayor, 31,100 for mayor. What I've not clarified is including a $50 a month technology allowance, or if that's $50 plus the 22, is the 22,300 inclusive or exclusive of the $50 technology budget is the only piece we need to clarify in here. And I think Director Mighton can show that on our budget document, that it's a separate line or identified as a technology budget, not part of the flat rate. But for this motion, this isn't the remuneration bylaw where we're getting quite that specific. So what she does with the budget lines, I guess the intent of this motion is, does the 22,300 include at this point in time, based on 2019 actuals, that technology allowance is in there. And I think Carrie can clarify that it will be identified separately on the budget.
Director Mighton.
Yeah, when I calculated that 22,300, that included $600 for the year for the technology allowance.
Okay.
Based on 2019. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if it would be appropriate to just clarify that wording in the motion, that the rates are as follows and include $50 a month technology allowance, because it doesn't change the motion. I don't think that requires an amendment. I think it's just clarifying the intent of the motion.
I see the mover of the motion, Councillor Townsend, is thumbs up to that in the affirmative. And Councillor Hergert, I believe you were the seconder. Was that correct, Clerk Sherbuck, for that motion? It's been a little while.
Actually, let me just, yes, it was Councillor Townsend and Councillor Hergert.
Good.
And I just want to make sure that if we're clarifying, it is indeed to include or not say in addition to. Councillor
Townsend, as the mover?
Yes, it was intended to have everything but the per diem for conferences, yeah. Seminars, okay. And the mileage.
Thank you for that clarity. As the seconder, Councillor Hergert?
I guess I have a question. My question is it better to take up the technology as an increase on its own, that we would say it's, it was $50 and now could we discuss it being $75? I mean, is that a separate motion? Right now we're talking about the wage, basically.
Through you, Your Worship. Yep. I think then we're talking about an amendment to the motion. If it's excluding the technology, are we putting that rate still at the 2019 rate, which would be these figures less $600? And then discuss the technology in a separate motion. So I guess the motion, if we're taking technology out of this motion, we need to adjust this 22,300 to be $600 less, is my understanding, to match Councillor Townsend's request that we stay in line with the 2019 amounts.
Okay. So
sorry.
I would like to have the minus $600 there and then have a discussion about the technology amount. So if it's the 22,300 minus 600, right, we're at 21,700.
Mm-hmm.
So is that what you're moving as an amendment?
Amendment, yes, please.
Okay, that's Councillor Hergert. Is there a seconder for that? Is that Councillor Shea? Oh, no, sorry, I see Councillor Hamilton's hand up. Councillor Hamilton, is that indication of a seconder?
Yes, Mayor, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll give the clerk a moment as she rewrites the amendment. And then I will, once the amendment is read, I will go through a few Councillor Hamilton and then Deputy Hutchinson. And also clarification while that's being done, Director Mighton, the position of mayor and deputy mayor does not receive technology.
Not currently, no.
So that adjustment will not, like the extraction of the amount for technology is not included in the mayor and deputies mayor's position, just for councillor position, correct?
Yes, except in this one, the mayor or the deputy mayor and councillor have the same per diem
Oh, yeah.
or the same honorarium. So that would be the same 21.7, but which would be in line with where the actual deputy mayor 2019 ended up, 21.8.
Okay.
And then the position of mayor does not include the reduction of the technology
No.
because they do not, the
Exactly.
position of mayor does not receive it.
Correct.
Thank you. Wanted that clarified,
Yep.
not only for members of council, but those listening in.
Yep.
Clerk Sharbuck, by any chance, are you ready to read the amendment?
I think so. And I'll ask for a thumbs up from Councillor Hergert and Councillor Hamilton that I have this. So an amendment to the main motion, moved by Councillor Hergert, seconded by Councillor Hamilton, that the main motion be amended by removing the technology allowance of $600 per year from the annual remuneration for council members. Do you want the new amount, or shall I just, this motion will adjust the amount in the main motion,
Okay.
21,700. So does that make sense?
Yeah, 21,700. Okay. Okay, so we have the amendment motion read to that. Councillor Hutchinson.
Yeah, just to point out that this whole discussion started that we were trying to make it simpler in terms of council remuneration, but also to try to keep our budget without an increase. So just to remind people, we're not trying to increase the amount here. We're just trying to get it simpler and move forward. So that's all.
Thank you for that comment. Councillor Hamilton.
Pardon me, no comment, thank you.
Okay, fair enough. Deputy Mayor Hutchinson.
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. I just, I have one question regarding conferences / seminars. I want a proper description or definition on what that means. If currently it's, we're allowed 2 conferences, and then is that all the same, or is it unlimited seminars? I would like to know what that means.
Director Mighton.
Until you amend the remuneration bylaw, right now it has the limit of the 2 conferences in there, and seminars. What is it? I think it's 2 conferences and 2 seminars, and that's currently in your remuneration bylaw. So when we do a new one with the new rates, unless you want to change that, clause of it, that there's a maximum of, that's the way it currently stands.
Thank you, Director Mayor. I was looking for the seminar one because I've just
2 and
done
2.
conference.
The mayor is different, but everyone
That's
else is
fine.
2 and 2. The mayor has.
Yeah, that's fine, but 2 and 2, that's what I wanted clarity on. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Unfortunately, we didn't get to it yesterday, but I do have did have a notice of motion that hopefully would have been addressed for simplicity. It wasn't because we ran out of time, but it was actually suggesting a revision to that. And I'm going to suggest that perhaps we can leave the per diem to that as well. Although it basically says that instead of doing the limitation of the, it's going to say keep the per diem the same as it is now, but the number of conferences and et cetera, hopefully would go away, and we'd be given a certain amount of dollars that we could actually spend. And that's another way to get it down to a flat amount. And however you want to spend it, you spend it as long as it's related to work-related items. You know, I don't want to take a needlepoint or anything like that up, you know, for on the cost of the or the expense of the municipality. But anyway, I would still say that if we can deal with the per diem, it can then be built into that as part of that notice of motion that'll come up at the next council meeting.
Thank you for that. Clerk Scharbach.
Through you, Your Worship. Just to clarify, we do have a motion on the floor, and it's an amending motion for our main motion. And the per diems and the council conference and even the mileage have been clearly separated out. So I wonder if we could get through this piece, and then whether it's council's wish to address the per diem for council for conferences after this, or leave it with the whole conference discussion. That would help keep us just getting through this piece with the flat rate remuneration.
Well, thank you for that suggestion. And I also note that I don't see any other hand up at this point, which timing is wonderful. So with that, Clerk Scharbach, could you please read the motion at hand?
Through you, Your Worship, that the motion regarding council remuneration be amended by removing the technology allowance of $600 per year from the annual remuneration for council members.
Okay, lots of discussion already. All those in favor, please indicate by raising your hand. Six members of council have voted. Okay, so I see 6 members of council have voted in favor. Then those, if you could clear the dashboard, and those opposed. 1 member of council has voted against, so the motion carries. Thank you. And I just want to note the delay, and when well, it's not really a delay. I'm looking at the hands raised, but I give a moment because I want to ensure that everybody has had a chance to vote. So just so you know that within the technology sphere. On the main motion, Clerk Scharbach, I believe we're at a stage. Oh, actually, excuse me, Director Maiton.
I just wondered if I could ask, just for clarification too, effective date. Will this be for January, or will it be at a later time when we actually pass the remuneration bylaw? Just so council and myself know how they should be submitting their timesheets at the end of this month.
How does council wish to deal with this? Councillor Hamilton, I see your hand up.
Great question. Thank you. I would suggest immediately, just to keep it really easy, because the way we report right now is very different. So my suggestion would be retroactive January 1st, this motion. Thank you. And that we implement it right away though too. But,
okay, I do see
yeah,
Clerk Scharbach. So,
I do.
so she does want to speak. So, and I do recognize the other speakers. Go ahead, Clerk Scharbach.
Just a thought that when this would be very similar to the staff pay grid, that it also requires the budget to be passed and a council remuneration bylaw to be passed. And that's the piece where we say it's retroactive to January 1st. So if we could, I'm just wondering, and it's really up to you, Director Mighton, is it possible to continue as we are until we get that remuneration bylaw passed, and then as soon as that's passed, we change the process? Or the
Director
pay
Mighton.
sheets?
Yep, sure. Everyone's used to submitting the way they currently are, so that's fine. We can continue that way and then deal with any, whether there's any changes retroactively or whether it's a go forward, but that's fine. I just wanted clarification on both counselor and
Right.
myself for what to expect.
Good, and I appreciate that a question of clarity, and so that we're all on the same page, and the expectation now is that it would be addressed through that bylaw. Okay, I think I'm on Councillor Townsend, and then Councillor Shea.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was going to suggest that we do actually make it January 1st. And if we could pass that bylaw, because we're actually trying to maintain the same costs, not increase costs, at the next council meeting, which is February 2nd, pretty close to the end of the month. And that way we do get the impact for all of 2021, and it wouldn't delay the issuance of any compensation by more than a few days. And I didn't know how appropriate that would be to do that, but it's not, we're not talking about increases. We're talking about just how you pay the amount out.
Director Mighton, to that comment.
Yeah, I'm not sure on the procedure.
I'll get there.
Yeah, but yeah, I'm open to either way. It's whichever way you want to move forward with it.
All right, so that's fine. Clerk Scharbach, then in terms of the bylaw coming a little earlier than expected.
I'm just thinking about the process. Yes. I think we are a little bit off the main motion here that is on the floor for voting.
Okay.
Wondering if just if we could get this motion with the numbers and the intent dealt with, and then revisit that. I'll have to collaborate with Director Mighton on getting that bylaw prepared for the agenda that'll be, I guess, getting prepared very soon, actually. So that's doable if it's council's wish, but I wonder if we could separate that direction from the motion that's on the floor.
So I'll go with the motion at hand, and then maybe there'll be a motion to deal with how we're going to handle the next step on that. So that's good. Okay, so Councillor Shea.
Thank you. Through you to Director Mighton, Rebecca mentioned this 1/3 tax allowance thing. Can you explain what that is and the impact?
Yeah, so we used to, was it 2019, maybe the province changed that? I could be off on my year. But council used to have 1/3 of their wages was exempt from income taxation. So the province did away with that. And so now 100% of council wages are subject to income tax. We have done can't think of the expense form, Revenue Canada form number 2, where you could allow to offset some of your home expenses against your income. I can't think of off the top of my head, it escapes me what the Revenue Canada number is, but there is that form. But yeah, it used to be 1/3 of the wages were completely exempt from income tax.
So when we came in, so we were making less in take-home pay after that. Is that right?
Correct. Yeah, because now all of it was being taxed. Yeah.
Okay, and did I understand that some municipalities adjusted for that?
Correct. Some did, yes.
And we didn't?
No, we did not.
I wonder if that's something, I wonder if that's something that council would like to entertain. Well, okay, I'll introduce the topic differently. I move that we introduce an adjustment that would compensate for that. See if there's a seconder.
Okay, so I'm looking for either, I guess, Clerk Charbuck's wordsmithing to make sure that the amending motion is very clear so that everyone knows what we're voting on. And also those listening in are very clear, as well as anybody that's going to listen in on the recording. So Clerk Charbuck, could you assist with perhaps what Councillor Shea is moving?
I can. We do have the main motion on the floor. So, and it sets out amounts and it excludes the technology piece. That will be a separate matter to address, and it excludes conferences and mileage. But it has an amount of $21,700 for members of council and deputy mayor, and $31,100 for mayor. And I just want to clarify that it's based on the 2019 amounts, was Councillor Townsend's intent with the beginning of this motion way back when was just the motion. And the 2019 amounts would have been based on that change in legislation. I believe it impacted the 2019 rate of pay or how it was claimed. Maybe check with Carrie on that. So to amend this motion to allow for an adjustment, I'm actually not sure how to word this. Director Mighton or Councillor Johnston, if you have a suggestion, because I don't know the amount.
Director Mighton first.
Yeah. That's a bit of a formula. So all the math is yours, Carrie.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't have an amount. The council of the day decided not to adjust their pay when that exemption was eliminated. So we are, in our situation, the council members, all council, the rate of pay stayed the same. So they chose not to. I'm just trying to think of what year. I'm just looking back to see.
I think it would have been this council for the first budget or the first year of the remuneration bylaw, but I'm not sure of the date of that legislation.
I'm just trying to see if I can find. I know when Marianne did the review, I think that was part of it, was where we saw the gap between our council and the average in our comparator group. Part of that difference was some of them had made a change or an adjustment for that, losing that exemption, and we hadn't. So that was where that when we show that $9,900 difference, part of that was realigning it, but it was bringing it up. I think the average, just looking at hers, depending on the market percentile, mayors were about 33, deputy mayor 24, and councillor 19. So, you know, we were not quite in line with some of our comparators, but to try to come up with an exact number, it'll take a little bit to go back and take a look, I think.
Well, is there a way that I can test the mood in the room just to see if anyone's even interested in this? This might be a mood issue that nobody's interested in bringing up. There's no such thing as straw votes, I know.
Through you, Your Worship. I get what you're saying, Councillor Shea. And I wonder if I would say that if council could give me an indication if we think about the wording for an amendment to this motion, whether it be to address that 1/3 taxation piece, before these numbers are finalized and put into the council, it would allow the Director of Finance to adjust the numbers to compensate for that 1/3 allowance being removed? Or I guess, do we bother fixing this wording or not?
Do you think I could perhaps just request a clarification of the history of this issue for further future consideration?
Yes, and I'm, through your worship, I'm wondering if this council would like I wonder if we put these numbers in the budget with further information to be brought forward from the Director of Finance, just advising on how the numbers would be different if we compensated for that 1/3 non-taxable amount. And the numbers can be adjusted in the budget, that this would be the starting point. Is that fair? Just because it's not easy to come up with that number just for today.
That would be fine. I would also be looking for a little bit of history, because if we decided as a council not to in the past, I wouldn't want to overturn that decision, but I don't recall having made that decision. So,
and
yeah.
Yes, through you, Your Worship, Councillor Shea, that's a piece that we also need a minute to look into, unless the CIO remembers more specifically.
Go ahead, Director Meighton.
So 2018 was the last year that we were able to claim that 1/3 exemption. So it was a decision of the previous council. Well, not a decision of the previous council. The province made the change.
Yeah.
Before you had the option of participating in the program, and our council always had done that previously. But then with 2018 was the last year that option was available to us because the province changed. The council in 2018 did not move forward with changing the council remuneration rate. But it was the previous council that made that choice. The 1/3 exemption was eliminated by the province, but we chose not to change our remuneration rate to reflect any difference. But that was done by the previous council.
But
go ahead, Clerk Sharbuck.
Has there been a remuneration bylaw since?
That was the last one, was passed by the previous council.
Okay, so this is the first time this council has actually addressed the 1/3 taxation piece. Okay, so it would be fair to ask for some numbers, even if these numbers in this resolution are a starting point. The budget has a long way to go, and council could at least consider the difference that 1/3 exemption makes and adjust the numbers in the budget if they deem it appropriate.
Okay. Councillor Shea?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, and I see Councillor Hutchinson.
Yeah, I'd like to settle this and move on, but if you look in our organizational review that Marianne Love did, the amounts that she put in there, what we're looking at right now, I believe are comparable. And I think she's taken some comparisons to other municipalities, so I don't think we're out of line. So I think if the compensation's been in there, I think we're okay. And like I said from the start, I don't want to see us giving ourselves a pay raise and changing the budget and so on. So I think we've got a service review that's given us some background. We can take a look at those numbers, but I think we're pretty much in line.
Okay, thank you for that. And I don't see any other hands raised. Great discussion. Clerk Sharbuck, on the, could you please read the motion that we are going to vote on?
Well, yes, but can I just clarify with Councillor?
Of course,
okay.
Of course.
So
Everybody needs clarity. We all need clarity.
So Councillor Shea, is it your intent to perhaps address the 1/3 or request the director for that information after this motion is voted on as a separate piece of direction?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, then then I know what I'm reading. So, through you, your worship, that, that for 2021 and forward, council compensation be moved to a flat rate honorarium based on 2019 actuals, with the exception of variables being mileage, seminars, and conferences, with rates as follows: 21,700 for members of council and the deputy mayor. And that amount reflects the removal of the $600 technology allowance. Or do you need that in there, or just that it? I would like to say that it does not include the $600 technology allowance, because I don't want that technology allowance piece to be missing.
We want it to be clear, but we would double
Yeah.
check. If you could read the motion as you've got it, then I'll go to Councillor Townsend, and I think it was Councillor Hergert on this, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, so Councillor Townsend's original piece is that for 2021 and forward, council compensation be moved to a flat rate honorarium based on 2019 actuals, with the exception of variables being mileage, seminars, and conferences. And that the rates are as follows: 21,700 for council members and the deputy mayor, and 31,100 for the mayor, and that the rates do not include the technology allowance of $600 per year.
Okay, Councillor Townsend as the mover. Is that the language for your motion?
I have a simpler suggestion.
Okay.
And just before you put variable amounts, say excluding or not including, right, the technology.
Okay, does that clarify for everybody? Councillor Hergert, is that clear that if with the mileage, seminars, and conferences and technology allowance?
Yeah, you say excluding because
yes,
that will be variable.
Yeah.
That's the only concern. Right?
And excluding, so the variables being those three items, and excluding the technology allowance.
Good.
With rates as follows. Is that?
That's fine. Yep.
Okay, I think that's clear. Thank you.
So the mover, Councillor Townsend, is fine. Councillor Hergert as a seconder, you're fine too. Okay, great discussion. I think we're at a point where I'm calling the vote. All those in favor indicate with a raised hand. All members of council have voted in favor of this motion. The motion carries. Okay. Good discussion. So, okay, Deputy Mayor, you've got your hand up before I speak again.
Yes,
Yep.
thank you, Mayor Robinson. We've been sitting here for a couple hours. Could we take a 5-minute stretch here and just kind of refresh here before we keep going, possibly?
Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. Why don't we take 10 minutes for that? So I'll see you back in 10 minutes. Enjoy. Okay, 2, 1, 2, 3. So we've got our members of council and we have our clerk, which is so important. And I think and our CAO, very important. All right, I think we're calling this back to order right exactly when we said we would. So we're very good on this. Before we go any further, which would be our next one that Director Mike would go through, I do see Councillor Hergert's hand up, so go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was curious, actually, I'm not curious. I wanted to move a motion about technology allowance.
Mhm.
And I would like that to be set at $75 per month. That's the motion that I would move. Small increase, but we are completely relying on technology right now.
Okay, is that for all members of council with the increase in the technology, or are you just specifically looking at what's included now, which would be, I guess it would also include the deputy, or I'm looking for clarification for your motion before I ask for a seconder, and also Director Maiton. Okay, Director Maiton?
Yeah, currently the technology allowance is just the 5 counselors, so it would need further clarification if we're going to include everyone or the status quo kind of thing.
Thank you for that clarification. So, Councillor Hergert, just for your clarification, your motion then?
Just for the same for the 5 of us, I guess, yeah.
Okay, Councillor Hamilton, are you seconding that motion?
Yes, Mayor, I'm seconding.
Okay, any questions on this? Okay, Councillor Hergert, your hand is still up. Do you have any comment at this point? No.
No.
Councillor Shea.
I was just curious if you could explain why the deputy mayor and mayor don't get a technology allowance, Carrie.
Director Maiton.
Yeah, that one, when they instituted that, it was back, they had a committee of, it was the first time they'd had a committee of the public review council remuneration. And that was the recommendation that had come out of it. Not sure if they were thinking they got technology or extra compensation at the county level or what their actual determination. It's been a while because they've had an independent committee review of citizens review twice. And that was, I think, determined in the first one that they came up with the technology allowance. So that's going back quite a bit. I'm not 100% sure of the actual how it came to be that those two didn't, but I'm thinking it must have had something to do with the county level, what might have been in remuneration at the time at the county.
To the mayor, do
Yes.
you get an allowance from the county?
I have a, what is it, an iPad, and I have a cell phone that I use for county business. I do use my own internet here for West Grey business. I have a West Grey issued laptop, which is very helpful for everything that I'm doing for West Grey purposes. Just because you asked the question, the allowance for payment towards internet, I mean, just during COVID times, but I do use the internet, my own internet at home when I always bring my computer home to work on. So,
It does strike me as a little bit inequitable that those
yes.
two council members wouldn't. I always assumed you got something from the county,
No.
and that was the reason. But if you're not, then I wonder if well, I'll just go ahead and make an amendment to the motion that it would be for all council members.
Okay, so that is moved by Councillor Shea for, and then is there a seconder? I'm seeing Councillor Hamilton's and nodding. Okay. All right, so that's to the amendment. Is there anything, Deputy Mayor, maybe to clarification on what I had said?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Robinson. Yes, just for clarification, yes, I am provided the, well, I have a laptop and a cell phone specifically for county. As far as municipal, I've used my desktop. I have everything running through that, my personal phone, as well as my residence number. So
yeah.
I'm not sure how we should be excluded from that, especially during what we're doing now. Thank you.
Thank you. I would ask the clerk just to read that motion, the amending motion, and I'm not seeing any other hands raised. So following the clerk reading the amending motion, I will call the vote.
So moved by, through your worship, moved by Councillor Shay, and I believe seconded by Councillor Hamilton.
Yes.
Okay, that the motion be amended to include all members of council for the technology allowance.
All those in favor indicate with the raised hand. Five members of council have identified that they support this motion. If you could clear your dashboard. All those opposed, please indicate with a raised hand. Two members of council have voted against this motion. The motion is carried. Okay. Thank you. Director Mighton, I think we are on to the next item on the list.
None.
Oh,
Pardon me? Oh,
Through
did I
your
miss?
through
Go
your-
ahead.
Through your worship, we are
Oh, of course.
back to the main motion.
Of course we are. Sorry, I forgot. That was amendment. Thank you all for keeping me on track. Certainly what we just voted on was an amendment. Clerk Sharbeck, thank you. It's getting late in the day. I do appreciate that. If you could read the motion at hand. Thank you.
Through your worship, moved by Councillor Hergert and seconded by Councillor Hamilton, that the technology allowance be set at $75 a month for all members of council.
Any questions, members of council, on the main motion? Councillor Hutchinson?
Sorry, I thought we just voted on that one.
No, we did not.
No, just the amendment, Councillor. Do you need more clarification from our clerk?
What did we just vote on then?
Clerk Sharbach, if you could read that motion that we just voted on.
Sure. Just to recap, the main motion first was that the technology allowance of $75 a month be for council, for 5 council members. And previously that technology allowance was not provided to the mayor and deputy mayor. So the amendment was to include all council members. So the mayor and deputy mayor would now also be included in that $75 tech allowance. So we voted on including the mayor and deputy mayor. Now we're going back to the main motion to set the amount for $75 a month.
Okay, that's fine.
It's always good to get clarity because we want to ensure clarity when we are voting on our motions. And actually the clarity is actually wonderful for anybody listening in.
Can I,
Okay,
sorry,
go ahead.
can I make an amendment to the amendment?
Well, this would be the main motion, so yes.
I'd like to move that we include the deputy mayor and the mayor at $50 to allow for technology, and the rest of the council stay at status quo.
Is there a seconder for that amendment? Councillor Townsend, are you seconding that amendment?
Yes, I'm seconding that amendment.
Point of order,
Yes, of course.
or maybe it's point of clarity. Is this not a contradictory motion?
Clerk Sharbeck, for an explanation
Or,
on
you know
where
what I
we're
mean.
at. Of
Yeah.
course, yes.
Thank you to your worship. Thank you, Councillor Hamilton, for raising that. I think it is contradictory to the main motion. Currently, the status quo is $50 a month for 5 members of council and nothing for the mayor and deputy mayor. So the main motion is that it be increased to $75 a month for all members of council. So everybody gets the same thing. So I guess the vote is to approve this increase from $50 to $75. Council has already deemed it appropriate to include the mayor and deputy mayor in this. So that decision's been made. To not vote for it is to leave it at status quo, where the mayor and deputy mayor aren't included. So It's getting a bit contrary to the main motion, I think, to set the increase. I'm wondering if it's not council's wish to set the increase to $75, this motion would just simply be defeated with a vote. In which case a follow-up motion could add in the mayor and deputy mayor for the $50 technology allowance. But I think that would keep the intent of the motion clear.
Okay, so what are, just thank you for that explanation. So if you could just read the motion at hand that we are voting on. Thank you.
That the technology allowance be set at $75 a month for all council members.
Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised. All those in favor indicate with a hand raised. I see 5 members have voted in favor of that. If you could clear your dashboard. All those opposed, please indicate with a raised hand. 2 members of council have voted against this motion, so the motion is carried. Okay. So we've dealt with everything with regard, I'm just checking with everybody, with the council remuneration and technology. Clerk Sharbach.
Thank you. Through you, your worship. I do have a note before we recessed. And while there was previous motions on the table, that separated from that were a couple of items, and I just want to touch base to make sure we're moving on without those motions.
Go ahead.
The request for the director to provide further information on the loss of the 1/3 taxable benefit and what that actually relates to in the take-home pay, basically, was one piece that there was, we had talked about addressing it afterwards. And the second one was, are we bringing a remuneration bylaw for council remuneration to the next meeting?
Oh, good.
So I just would ask for a bit of direction on those 2 items.
Good, and thank you for not losing sight of that as we wade through not only the decision-making, but also as we're putting motions and amending motions forward. Thank you for that. Councillor Shea.
I'm going to withdraw my request to investigate the 1/3 tax item any further.
Okay, thank you. So then we're dealing with the second issue, Clerk Sharbach, the remuneration bylaw.
Yes, I forget now who who raised that matter.
I believe Councillor Hamilton, if I'm not mistaken, but maybe not. Councillor Hamilton has her hand up, so let's find out.
Okay, thank you. I did ask about it. It's true. I don't have that clarity for you. I just, Madam Clerk, but I didn't want to lose sight of the conference per diem too, and if that is going to be a future conversation or a now conversation. So I'll add that to the list. Thank you.
And through you, your worship, that's a good point, Councillor Hamilton, because that conference per diem is going to form part of this remuneration bylaw. And I'm wondering if having that remuneration bylaw on the very next meeting is maybe a bit quick on that if we don't get those decisions done today. Just thoughts. But yes, Councillor Hamilton is correct that per diem piece needs first, and then that forms part of the remuneration bylaw.
Anything further, Councillor Hamilton?
No. Other than I want to advance this conversation and make a decision about the conference per diem. Perhaps may I ask our treasurer to let us know, is there an average that we receive? Is it, well, I guess it's per conference day. If she could just give us a bit of a picture of what that looks like or perhaps what it looked like in 2019. Thank you.
Thank you. Director Mighton.
Okay, so in 2019, the total amount spent for conferences across everyone was $7,405 and a little bit of change, but $7,400 for everyone. Typically, conferences, depending on if it's a 3-day, 4-day, but it's usually the full day. Seminars, again, depending on what it is, those may be half day, but more often than not, they're a full day. They used to be either drive somewhere and by the time you would get there, even if you went to London for the day, you'd go to London, then drive home. It was still a full day that was occupied. So those typically were also full days, but there was a few that if they were more local in nature, might have been a half day, that 4 hours or less.
Councillor Hamilton, anything further?
So in terms of an approach, I take it that conferences have changed a lot with them being virtual. But this isn't about the conference fee. This is about remuneration for our time. And did that number also include the mileage, or was that just our honorariums, Director Mayne?
Yeah, that was strictly the honorariums, mileage, meals, conference registration, hotel accommodations. Those would be outside of that $7,400. That $7,400 was just the per diem pay.
Okay, and what was that per diem pay per day back in 2019, please?
In 2019, so that, 2019, it was $160.62 for a full day. In 2000, currently in 2020, it's $163.35.
Okay. 162. Okay. Okay, so I'm thinking we need to set a budget and divide it. And I'm sorry, this is for councillors and our mayor and our deputy mayor were captured in this number.
Yes.
Okay. And when our mayor and deputy mayor when they go to like a Grey County funded conference, like they would pay for the conference fee, do we, as West Grey, are we paying a per diem for them to be there as well? Is that part of our current math?
No, not if they attend Good Roads through the county, then the county looks after any remuneration for them.
Okay. Thank you. I appreciate all the information, but I don't have a path forward at this time. I just want to say, as someone who's self-employed, I really I depend on or appreciate the opportunity to have that honorarium, because otherwise it would be a choice between working or going to a conference, if that makes sense. So if I go to a conference and I can't work, then that's a hit for me, and that might mean I won't be able to attend a conference. So I think having that time, that honorarium to go, as someone who's self-employed, is very important. But I don't have a math path for it. I'm sorry. I'll leave it there for now. Thank you.
Thank you. And you did ask the questions that for your clarity, so, and that's very, very good. Councillor Shea, please.
Thank you. Carrie, you've got all the numbers at your fingertips. Do you know how much the expenses were for like the hotel, air, mileage, meals?
I have, for excluding the, and I guess it would sort of, if the member paid for it themselves, I have it sitting at my fingertips. If the municipality paid it, like the room cost on our corporate credit card, I don't have that showing up on here.
That's probably most of them.
Yeah, exactly. So I have mileage and probably mileage, meals, and parking probably would be the main items that you would have paid out of pocket. Normally, we've picked, like we've already through the corporate credit card done the registration and the accommodations typically.
And airfare.
So just those were, and mileage includes mileage for all, not just conferences. It would include for showing up to, like in 2019, going to Elmwood, driving to the office here, for every meeting. So again, so I've got like $12,000 in mileage, but that was when we were traveling on site for every council meeting, every committee meeting. It's not, I don't have it isolated between conference travel versus
Okay.
regular meeting travel. What about 2020? What does?
Well, it's not necessary. I guess I'm just thinking that the honorarium for conference participation is the smaller part of the expense. The larger part is registration, airfare, hotels, all of that stuff, right? Probably 3 or 4 times the size.
Yeah.
And there's a number of conferences that we don't participate in, largely because of the cost. Like our bylaw says that we can pick 2 conferences. So I could go to FCM in Vancouver and in the spring, and then go to FCM in Halifax in the fall, and that's my prerogative, right? But nobody does that because it just seems way too expensive. So I wouldn't mind moving towards a system where we sort of divvy up all of the expenses, including the airfare, the hotel, and everything, and say, you do what you want in terms of professional development and conferences. It's not cash. We wouldn't get it and then pocket it. It would only be available to us if we're actually going to participate. But I might say, I'm not going to go to 2 conferences and 2 seminars this year because there's a really important conference in Edmonton that I want to go to, and it's kind of expensive. So I'm just going to put all my resources into that one conference. Also, if we did it this way, we would have some flexibility. There are some books I have wanted to buy, like some $160 books on municipal governance that I haven't bought. I wouldn't mind having a copy of Roger's Rules of Order, Genevieve, and it's very expensive. So if we had that fund, we would be able to say, I would like to also dip into that fund to be able to buy, this book or a professional magazine subscription or something like that. Again, I don't have a path forward. I'm just saying these are things that I've often thought of that I would like to be able to do. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Townsend.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, I'll flip back to the notice of motion that was at yesterday's council meeting, which I'm sure you've all read. And what it basically said was take the expenses that we have, break it down so there's so much per council member, and say that this is what you have for the year. So you don't turn around and have to say it's 2, it's 1, it's airfare, not airfare, etc. The trick is you would have a pot of money to spend that would allow you to go to 17 conferences and seminars. If it costs you $10 each, who cares, right? And you've got the time. And again, your per diem and all that are handled through the other issue. But again, I would say be careful, because I think you'd want that in there as well. You can't just, have $10 conferences all over and then you're charging $165 a day to sit there. It's a nice way to run up your compensation. And I'm not saying we would do it. In fact, I would guarantee we wouldn't, but the perception might not be right to the public. And so that's why we'd have to include that. Bottom line is the intent was also to return some savings back to the municipality. So take a certain percentage of those expenses and give them back, because we're not really going to spend that kind of money. And we also wouldn't incur the more expensive part, which is hotel room and airfare. That tends to be your bigger one. But again, like I said, we didn't get to that yesterday, so we couldn't have that discussion. So I'm wondering, with Director Mighton knowing that was coming, I wonder if you'd be able to give us any kind of guideline on what might be a reasonable amount. I see that you've already dropped some of the budget under council for memberships and conferences. I can't see exactly what the memberships would be, because I'm sure they would be different. So if you have anything to contribute to that to help us move along, that would be excellent. If not, you're right, we might be trying to be a little too quick in trying to bring it on February 2nd.
So Director Mike, do you have a comment at this point?
Yeah, I have not looked into the deep numbers, not knowing where you were heading with what you wanted included. What we were still picking up is, you know, the registrations, the mileage, the meals, what is included in that spending package. If you just get a flat rate, is the per diem included in that? Is that excluded from that? So yeah, I've given direction. We can try to work through, and I can pull some old numbers to see what it was in 2019, because obviously 2020 was very different. But yeah, needing a bit of direction to come at what you're wanting included in that flat rate, if you will, for conferences. Is it all encompassing, or is there still meals and per diems on top of it, or what gets included, what gets excluded?
You still have the mic, Councillor Townsend.
Thank you very much. So my second thought, which again I'll float out, is it possible to revise the remuneration to only deal with the honorarium, leave the rest as it is until such time as we get to that in February or whenever we finalize that?
For your notice of motion.
Sorry?
For your notice of motion?
Yes, which should be discussing on the 2nd.
Yeah.
So.
Okay, that's a great suggestion. How do we all feel about that? Councillor Shea?
Well, the remuneration is the smaller part of the conference seminar expense. So I think we should look at the whole picture, possibly at the meeting that your notice of motion is coming to, and sort of try and wrap up everything in the same discussion.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Councillor Mighton, Director Mighton, does that flows naturally, you know?
Sure. Yep.
Yeah, in terms of that suggestion. Okay, so that is an item that is put on again the date of that, Clerk Sharbach, for the notice.
Your worship, Councillor Townsend's notice of motion will be on our next agenda, so it will be up for discussion on February 2nd. And I know that's not a lot of time. Our Director of Finance won't have time for a formal written report, but we might have time to investigate a few options, or perhaps look at some best practices across the province and what's working well and what's not. I don't know what we'll have time to figure out by then, but it's not long till that discussion, February 2nd.
And thank you also for just identifying that expectation level, or what staff is able to accomplish in that short time frame. And I appreciate, we all appreciate you identifying that. Madam CAO, did you have anything to add to that?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that's perfect. Yep.
Okay, so we're dealing with that.
If I may.
Of course you can.
Thank you. I was actually going to say the same thing. I was going to direct a question to Director Mighton to ask her whether or not that was possible to even have any information by then. But even if we do it for the end of February, we're still doing pretty well.
Excellent.
So, thank you.
Okay, very good. So I think we're off the discussion of council at this point. Members of council, has it been a full day, a very successful day? Are you interested in adjourning at this point, or are you looking at continuing on? Like it, with that, Deputy Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor Robinson. I personally, I think we had an extremely long day yesterday, and I think we're well into today, and I think we might be more productive coming back fresh-minded at this. I think we've accomplished quite a bit today, but that's just my preference. Thank you.
Well, thanks for your input, and I do recognize that tonight is at 7 p.m. is the public meeting with regard, the library, West Grey Library is hosting this, and this is in regards to the Elmwood Resource Center. I'm just going to suggest this, that we continue the balance of this agenda, and however, Director Mighton has the information for our next meeting, which is January 27th. And then if members of council are fine with that, then we could for an adjournment. Councillor Hamilton.
I can support that, Mayor Robinson.
Wonderful.
Could I suggest we do some sort of doodle poll for and just earmark some spots in our February calendar? I don't expect we'll complete our budget next Wednesday.
No.
Just to hold them on our calendar.
Yes, and I wondered if council was council certainly was anticipating that, but I wonder if staff was already anticipating that. I'll go right to Director Mighton, because certainly this is under her portfolio. Does that make sense in terms of just having, and whether it's through the clerk's office, some suggested dates that we could take a look at? Director Mighton?
Yep, I think I can try to work with Genevieve on the, with Clerk Sharbuck on what dates might be available based on the council committee calendar that we have. Because we just had those two original ones scheduled, so we'll have to see and then send out to everyone to see what their availability might be.
That's wonderful. And I'll also connect with Clerk Sherback to identify what my February looks like as well. So just to have that information. Okay, folks, extremely well done. A lot of work that's been taking place. So we're clear in terms of the items moving forward as how it would be addressed on the next agenda. However that unfolds, Director Mike and we defer to your expertise and what that would look like. Is that all right with members of council as we move this agenda forward? And if everybody's fine with that, I would be looking at item 9, adjournment. So Clerk Sharbuck, would you read the recommendation at hand?
Your worship, the recommendation is that we do now adjourn. It's 4:21 p.m.
Is there a mover for this motion? Councillor Hergert, are you moving this motion?
Yes, I am.
And I see Deputy Mayor Hutchinson as the seconder.
Yes, Deputy Mayor Hutchinson will second.
All those in favor indicate with a raised hand. All members of council have voted in favor of this motion. The motion is carried. We stand adjourned. Thank you very much for a most enjoyable first meeting of our budget deliberations.
Thank
Take
you,
care.
staff.
Good night. Thank you.